Good afternoon. Welcome and thank you for coming to Wenham's 2022 annual town meeting. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Roger Smerridge, your town moderator. It's nice to see everyone who has turned out today to take part in the town's annual legislative process. Your fellow citizens, including myself, and the boards and committees appearing in front of you, greatly appreciate you taking time out of your Saturday to participate in this important part of the democratic process. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping matters that need to be addressed. First, today's meeting is being broadcast live and is also being recorded. Second, please note that any voters not in the designated voting areas here in the gym and in the multipurpose room will not be counted by me or, if we need, our tellers. Third, while we are no longer using the tent, we're still maintaining some level of physical distancing. So please keep that in mind, particularly when lining up to speak at the microphones. Nevertheless, as I said, all voters must remain within the gym or the multipurpose room so that I and the assistant moderator can see everyone and be able to declare the votes. Because of the desire to have designated space where masks are required today, we are making use of the multipurpose room as an overflow room. To those in the multipurpose room, please know that the fact that you are sitting there rather than here in the gym does not alter in any way your ability to participate in today's meeting. Your votes will be counted just the same, and you can speak when recognized by the moderator, just like those sitting here in the gymnasium. However, in order to make this process run smoothly, I need to appoint an assistant moderator to oversee things in the multipurpose room and to confer with me on the vote counting and other procedural matters. The assistant moderator will be vested with the same powers as me, except for the power to recognize a speaker and to declare a vote. In short, the assistant moderator will help ensure that today's meeting runs in an orderly fashion despite the use of the overflow space. At this time, pursuant to Chapter 39, Section 14 of the General Laws, I appoint Christopher Thompson to serve as today's assistant moderator. I would now ask Town Clerk Trudy Reed to swear in Mr. Thompson as today's assistant moderator.
Please raise your right hand. You, Christopher Thompson, solemnly swear that you will faithfully and impartially perform the duties as assistant moderator for the town of Wenham to the best of your knowledge, ability, and to the bylaws of the town, and laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the Constitution of the state.
I will. Thank you, Trudy, and thank you, Chris, for serving as the assistant moderator today. Please head down to the multipurpose room. We have a few more preliminary matters to address before proceeding with the business of the day. First, could I ask all residents that are able and willing to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, I want to thank the following. Town Hall staff for helping to organize and execute another safe town meeting, especially as we transition back to holding town meeting here in the Bucher School. We're not totally out of the woods yet with the COVID-19 pandemic, so a lot of time and thought has gone into today's preparations. I would also like to thank our interim town administrator, Tom Younger, executive assistant to the town administrator, Michelle McGovern, finance director, Jamie Colon, director of public works, Rich Souza, facilities manager, Michael Hardy, town clerk, Trudy Reed, the members of the select board, and the members of the finance and advisory committee for the time and attention they have put into preparing for this day. Their efforts, along with the town's department heads and staff leading up to town meeting, are always appreciated. Next, I would like to thank the people. Oh, that reminds me. Thank you, Diane. Could you please all turn off or silence your cell phones? It wasn't you? Okay. Oh, it was my wife. Thank you, Jill. I'm going to hear about that later tonight. Absolutely, you're right, Trudy, it was planned. She and I coordinated that earlier. I would like to thank the people who are assisting with the check-in process. They are the Board of Registrar members, Roseanne Brzezinski and Christine Burns, and election worker Pat Purdy. I also want to thank those who have volunteered today to serve as tellers if we need them, who will assist with any vote counting. Today's tellers are Pat Purdy, Bill Wilson, Natalie Bowers, Janet Burt, Svetlana Christine, and Lauren Schwartz. Finally, I would like to recognize certain residents and town employees who have stepped down in the last year or who are completing their final term in office. Michelle, if you could, thank you. Please hold your applause until I've announced all 6 of those who we are recognizing today. Virginia Rogers. Ms. Rogers has served on the planning board for 20 years. Bruce Blanchard. Mr. Blanchard has served on the Wenham Housing Authority for 10 years. Michelle Bailey. Ms. Bailey has served on the school committee since 2016, and before that she served on the Board of Assessors and the Cemetery Commission for 2 years apiece. Tom Perkins. Mr. Perkins served on the police force for 35 years, including 9 years as our police chief before retiring last year. Bill Tyak. Mr. Tyak served as the head of the Department of Public Works for 16 years before he retired at the end of 2021. And finally, Catherine Harrison. While town meeting recognized Ms. Harrison back in 2020 for her long-standing service to the town, both on the select board and in other roles, we wish to give Ms. Harrison particular recognition today. During an unprecedented challenge to the town, both in terms of the COVID pandemic, but also the loss of quorum on the select board, Ms. Harrison came out of retirement, so to speak, to rejoin the board and has admirably served as its chair as she completed a term left open due to resignation. This week will be Ms. Harrison's last on the select board, as we will elect a successor for her seat on Thursday. We thank you all for your service to the town. As is our tradition, we will now recognize the residents who have passed away during the last year and whose names will be listed on the screen. Please join me in a moment of silence to show our respect to these residents and their families. Thank you. I would now like to acknowledge Senator Bruce Tarr, as well as Representative Jamie Belcedo. They have been keeping the Select Board, Finance Committee, and School Committee up to date with information from Beacon Hill, and we thank them for their advocacy and support. Although typically we only allow Wenham residents to speak at town meeting, I would like to give Senator Tarr, and I'm not sure, is Representative Belcedo present? No, I don't believe so, but I would like to give Senator Tarr roughly 5 minutes to update the residents on any developments from the State House. As such, the moderator recognizes Senator Tarr.
Well, thank you, Mr. Moderator, and through you to the members of town meeting. I do want to say I heard that loud chuckling when you uttered the time frame 5 minutes. But just to allay any fears that might be out there, I won't try to use Representative Belcedo's time as well to add to my own. It is great to be here with all of you and to see us be able to gather together, albeit still with some safety precautions that are necessary for public health, but it's wonderful to be here with all of you at town meeting, back here at the Bucher School to talk about the future of the town. And it's wonderful to see so many folks come out to engage in the decisions that are so important to the operations of the town. I want to join with all of you in thanking the public servants that were recognized just a few moments ago on the screen, and thank them for being such great examples of why Wenham is a great place to be, because we're served by such wonderful people of such high integrity who work every day to make the operations of town government function. And I would also extend those same thanks to our colleagues in government, so the Board of Select People, the Select Board, and Catherine, I want to pay particular thanks to you. Over the years, we've had an opportunity to work together in so many different ways, and it's nice to be working with you in this tour of duty as well, and as well the town administrator, Tom Younger, who I've had the opportunity to work with in many different settings, and we're very fortunate that you were able to serve the town at this time. So thank you. As well as the Finance Committee and all of the folks that are in charge of our schools and certainly the clerk and all the folks at Town Hall. These have been particularly difficult and challenging times, and it's required all of us to rise to the challenge to give our very best to make sure that the operations of government have continued to flow and that we're continuing to be able to meet the needs of everyone who depends on the various functions of government. And in that respect, I do want to offer particular thanks to the town for two regional efforts that are continuing to be ongoing. One is the participation in the regional vaccination clinic, the Greater Cape Ann regional vaccination effort. I am so proud of the way the communities in our region pulled together to be able to provide vaccination services locally in our communities at a time when they were desperately needed. And it was a truly amazing collaborative effort. It is now in the phases of winding down for obvious reasons, but it is still at the ready if needed, and I want to express appreciation for that. A similar effort that the town is involved in that deserves great recognition and great appreciation is our efforts toward water resiliency. We know how important it is to have sustainable water supplies in our region and also to protect the aquifers that provide us with our drinking water. And Wenham has been a very active participant in our North Shore Water Resiliency Task Force, and I want to say thank you for that. In addition to that, I just want to let you know that right now we are in some of the busiest times that there are in state government as we in the legislature work to develop a state budget for the coming fiscal year of 2023. And I recognize Representative Balsito, who just came in, because she is going to get the first crack at the budget. The House will be debating that fiscal year 2023 budget very shortly in April, and the Senate will take on the task of debating the budget in May. And we are in particularly interesting circumstances that we didn't think we would find ourselves in. We had thought at the beginning of the pandemic that we would be depleted of a lot of resources just to keep things operating with the challenges that the pandemic imposed on our economy. But actually, I'm pleased to report to you that we are not in the position that we thought we would be in. When we went into the pandemic, we had a stabilization fund of about $3.5 billion, which is very good. And we thought that we would have to use nearly every penny of it to continue to balance the state budget and keep things moving. The good news is, by the end of this fiscal year, we anticipate that that stabilization fund will be somewhere between $4.5 and $6 billion. It's very impressive. In addition to that, we continue to see strong revenue returns. And so right now, as we stand and sit here today, the state budget is we are collecting approximately $1.7 billion above the benchmark upon which the budget is based. And in addition to that, we still have about $2.5 billion left of so-called ARPA money that was given to Massachusetts as one of about 23 states that got a discretionary block of funding to be able to use. We've spent about half of it. We have about half of it left. Now that's the good news, but I want to issue a word of caution. We have been experiencing certainly terrific economic results, but we still face significant challenges. Employers are still challenged to be able to find enough employees to operate their businesses. We have rising cost of energy for a variety of reasons, including the unjust and unconscionable war being perpetrated by Russia against the people of Ukraine. We continue to see disrupted supply chains and resulting inflationary factors that could well threaten the continuation of the robust prosperity that we're seeing. And so as we have all of those resources that I mentioned, we do have to be very cautious about how we move forward. And we look forward to doing that as the House and the Senate debate the budget and ultimately it returns to Governor Baker. But Governor Baker did begin the budgetary process by providing significant resources for cities and towns, a 3.5% increase for unrestricted general government aid, and a very sizable increase for Chapter 70 for school funding. Those are commitments that we have all been working to keep over the last several years, and I can predict they will be kept in this budget cycle as well. So as we return back to Beacon Hill, we will carry forward certainly the messages that are coming from our town meetings, and we are pleased to see so many folks come out and engage in decisions of how to spend the resources that you have, just as we will work to try to provide as many of those resources as possible while ensuring that state spending remains disciplined, focused, and effective. And so thank you very much for a few moments to be able to speak. Representative, I did say that I would not use your time. There was a little bit of apprehension that I might speak for both of us. I did not go there. So I am going to yield the microphone, but not before saying thank you for the honor of representing a wonderful town in the Massachusetts State Senate. It is an honor and a privilege to work with all of you and for all of you, and I hope the rest of town meeting goes very, very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carr. The moderator will now recognize Representative Belcedo. And Ms. Belcedo, I'll ask, I gave Senator Tarr about 5 minutes. If you could roughly stick to that as well, that would be much appreciated. We've got a lot of business to conduct this afternoon.
Mr. Moderator, I appreciate that. And I have said this on the record and off the record. I think that Bruce and I are going to start our own radio show. I'm still trying to see if that's going to pan out, but I appreciate the need for brevity. It's a big deal to be here today. I must admit I was looking for which tent I was to be under this morning and realized we were actually in person. And I wanted to say hats off to the Board of Health in this community, in our abutting communities, Hamilton, all of our region, the 4th Essex District, Ipswich, the GCAC, I think is what we're calling it now. The long story short is we are here indoors today because of the work and the efforts put forth by those individuals and those staffs in our town. And every single person here, I think, the Board of Selectmen, Select Women Board, I'm not sure what we call it now anymore, sorry. Thank you, Select Board, Town Council, etc., and Finance. And I would like to say thank you to the Town Clerk and everyone here. It is a collective effort for us to be under this roof today. So, and thank you to the Senator for the work you've done in bringing everyone together to make sure that we're healthy. And I will also say, as I said earlier this morning to Hamilton, thank you to the school committee and the work that you've done to protect our children in our schools and make sure, and Superintendent, I just, yeah, hi. Just saw you guys. That it's paramount that our families are safe and protected and our students are learning, and I think everyone's done a phenomenal job. So thank you. I'm blessed to be able to take over this position, and just want to say a couple of things. I wanted to talk about the fact that yes, indeed, I did get before the House Ways and Means, which is who makes the decisions on the financial requests for our budgets. And when it was a part of that, Tom is my dear friend. Thank you. He and I worked on what we need for Wenham, and did make sure that with my, as I joke around, my bad accent, my loud voice, that Wenham is not lost in the shuffle, that our communities are not lost in that shuffle. We aren't Lawrence, we aren't Lynn, we aren't Haverhill, but we have needs, and every single community should have equity when it comes to those needs. And I want to make sure that we are represented. I will also let you know, in that same vein, I have joined the regional school caucus, because we need to have a voice in that discussion. I have seen that we are only able to fund maybe 7% of the school budget, and we need to do as best as we possibly can to support our communities, take that tax burden off the back of the taxpayer. I myself am one of those as well. I am thankful for the partnership with the Senator's office. We are looking at the unique opportunity for federal funds born out of this very difficult time. Has been an emphasis on what we've needed for a long time, and that's infrastructure and support for our families and for our schools. And I look to support that alignment with the town, make sure that we don't miss any opportunities. Same goes with grant funding, all of those things. Thrilled to be able to help facilitate whatever I can in my capacity. I'm here to serve you. I'm here to serve our communities, and that's what I do every day when I get into that State House, and I do that in partnership with the Senator. the water access infrastructure, the North Shore Water Task Force, all of the things that are water. It's our lifeblood. We are in a very unique position to live in a community that has one of the most incredible river waterways with the Ipswich River shed, and it's also one of our most endangered. And so from the senator's office in Washington right down to our town offices, we're working very hard to make sure that we don't lose an opportunity of a lifetime, and that's to keep our communities safe. So dedicated to that as well. I am always available to meet with anyone. I will say I've been very cautious throughout my campaign, 2 campaigns in getting into the State House during the time of COVID. But now that we are in a place where we're in much more safe spaces, I am more than happy to meet with you wherever you're comfortable. Please call my office. The State House is open. I'm more than happy to meet with you in there. I want it to be accessible, and I want to be able to meet you wherever is best comfortable. I think this community, it's taken care of all of our community members with the utmost of love during such a hard time. It's great to see everyone here today. I want to thank the moderator. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for the time. And if anyone would like to get in touch with me, I will be here. But you can also find me. I am the B, Bell Cito, when you take a look at the legislators list online. And wish you a wonderful town meeting. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Belcito. A few more introductions are in order. In addition to myself, up here on the stage to my left, we have Robin Stein, Town Council from KP Law, Town Clerk Trudy Reed, and Michelle McGovern, the Executive Assistant to the Town Administrator. Seated in front of the stage, down to my right, Interim Town Administrator Tom Younger, and the members of the Select Board, Chair Catherine Harrison, Vice Chair Gary Cheeseman, and Diane Bucco. Seated in front of the stage to my left, we have the Finance and Advisory Committee. The committee consists of Chair Jim Purdy, David Molitano, Susan Malin, David Reed, and Scott Schoenberger. And they're joined by Jamie Colon, our Finance Director and Town Accountant. Also in attendance today is our School Committee Chair, Dana Lara, and the other members of the School Committee, Anna Cizik, Jennifer Carr, Julia Campbell, Michelle Horgan, Michelle Bailey, and is David Polito here? I'm not sure if he is, but David Polito is the other member of our School Committee. So with the School Committee, today, our interim school superintendent, Eric Tracy, and assistant superintendent of finance and administration, Vincent Leone. With those introductions out of the way, it is time to turn to the business of the meeting. Our town bylaws require that we have a quorum of 120 registered voters. I have been advised by our town clerk, Trudy Reed, that the quorum has been met. So I now call the annual town meeting to order. I'll do this officially. There we go. We are now in session. We will omit the return of the warrant, which shows that it has been properly served. The conduct of our meeting is governed by the rules of town meeting time, a special set of parliamentary procedures developed by the Massachusetts Moderators Association for New England town meetings. My responsibilities as your town moderator include presiding over and regulating today's proceedings, declaring questions of order, declaring votes, and granting leave to address the meeting. To ensure that we have an orderly meeting and that people who want to speak are able to do so, permission of the moderator is required to address the meeting. So if you wish to speak when discussion is open, please come to one of the microphones and wait at an appropriate distance to be recognized. When you ask to be recognized, please state your name and street address. If you are located in the multi-purpose room and wish to speak, please notify the assistant moderator and then proceed into the gymnasium and wait at the microphone in the rear. You will be recognized just the same as those sitting here in the gym. Once you have made any remarks, I ask that you return to the multi-purpose room to ensure that your vote on any motion is properly counted. There will be a 3-minute speaking maximum per resident per article. After 3 minutes have passed, I will hold up my hand to let you know that your time is up. Please wrap up your remarks when you see me put up my hand. If you continue speaking other than a wrap up, I will let you know that your time is up and that we'll move on to the next speaker. Now, 3 minutes is not selected at random. To quote a long-serving moderator from the town of Andover, 3 minutes is enough for anyone. After 5, you put them to sleep. After 7, they're going to vote against you, even if they agree with you. So that gives some sense of why we cap each resident's remarks to 3 minutes per article. Now, please remember that we are in a legislative session today for the town of Wenham. We are here today with friends and neighbors, and while spirited debate is always welcome, please remain cordial and respectful, no matter the issue at hand. Civility is not an option at town meeting. You may disagree with other speakers, but please do so without being disagreeable. Do not make remarks of a personal nature, whether directed at an elected official, an appointed member of the town government, town or school district staff, or any of your fellow citizens. Any comments or questions should be directed to the moderator rather than the boards, committee members, other residents, or prior speakers. Town meeting is not a forum for cross-examination of presenters or speakers. If necessary, should a question arise, and I deem it appropriate, I may then ask the person making the motion, or any other member of the town government, if appropriate, to address the question as best can be done. Whether you decide to speak on a motion or not, please refrain from applauding, cheering, or, for that matter, booing a speaker's remarks. Disorderly conduct is grounds for removal from the meeting after a warning, but I trust that that will not be necessary today. While we have a number of non-residents in attendance, we generally only allow residents to speak on the articles on the warrant. However, I will assume that the meeting is comfortable allowing the interim town administrator, department heads, and town council to speak when they have relevant information and have been recognized by the moderator. Hearing no objections, I declare that it is so by unanimous consent. The superintendent of schools has a statutory right to speak before the town votes on the school budget, and I will similarly assume that the superintendent may ask the assistant superintendent or other school officials to provide information to the meeting. If any other non-resident wishes to speak on a particular matter, they may request to do so through me, the moderator. As I previously noted, however, it is not our tradition to allow such speakers. If I nevertheless deem the request appropriate, informative, and consistent with our practice, I will then ask the town meeting to vote on any such request. At this meeting, the town clerk's role is to keep the official record of all motions and all votes taken. In the event of a counted vote, the town clerk has several election officers, we refer to them as tellers here in the town meeting setting, standing by. If a counted vote does occur, we ask that everyone remain seated in order to ensure accurate counting of votes. And as a reminder, and regardless of any physical distancing being observed, if you are not within the gym or the multipurpose room, your vote will not be counted. Only registered voters may vote. Each voter received a voter card at the check-in. If you are a registered voter but did not receive a voting card, please see the election officers at the check-in table in the vestibule in the back of the gym. If you do not have a voter card, you will not be able to vote. We will not be using electronic clickers for any voting today. Rather, when putting a motion to vote, I will first ask those in favor to raise their voting card. Then, after those in favor have been noted and lowered their card, I will ask for those opposed to raise their voting card. At that point, I will, if possible, declare the vote. Our town bylaws allow me to declare a vote even where a 2/3 vote is required, in addition to simple majority votes. If I am not able to declare the vote based on my observation of the room, in consultation with the assistant moderator regarding his observation of the multipurpose room, then we will move to a counted vote using the tellers. If this occurs, I ask for your continued patience as the tellers make their rounds. Please do not move around while the tellers are tallying up the vote. Please note that a motion to move the question, which is a motion intended to stop debate and move to a vote, is only in order when made by a person who I have recognized to speak from the speaker's line. A motion to move the question may not be preceded by argument or question concerning the article or pending motion, and any effort to move the question after such a speech will be ruled out of order. Moreover, although a motion to move the question requires a second, it is not debatable. A motion to move the question requires a 2/3 vote, and if approved, means that the town meeting moves straight to the vote on the pending motion, whether that motion is the main motion, a motion to amend, or some other motion. If a motion to move the question is defeated, we carry on with the discussion of the pending motion. With those last few preliminary matters taken care of, let's now turn to the warrant and begin. The warrant before us today presents 15 articles, including a consent agenda of 4 of those articles. Rather than reading the text of each article, which already appears in your warrant book and which will appear on the screens in both rooms, I will now provide a brief overview of each article. Unless I hear an objection, therefore, we will waive the reading of the articles by unanimous consent and move on. Hearing no objection, the articles are as follows. Article 1 proposes the operating budget for the next fiscal year, both for the town and the regional schools. Article 2 covers the use of free cash to fund the fiscal year 23 capital improvements. Article 3 deals with a few bills from prior fiscal years, which require a 4/5 vote. Articles 4 through 7 are our consent agenda articles. These are annually approved, but nevertheless required by law. Article 8 addresses appropriations and reservations under the Community Preservation Act. Please note that this article has 4 subparts. Article 9 proposes a bylaw amendment regarding the time for solicitation and canvassing in town. Articles 10 and 11 propose certain action with respect to the town's bylaws on dog licensing fees. Article 10 covers a slight increase to the annual fees and, at the same time, the elimination of the late licensing fee. Article 11 proposes the adoption of a Massachusetts general law that eliminates dog licensing fees for residents aged 70 or over. Article 12 deals with an amendment to an agreement approved through a prior year's town meeting vote to extend the time for Harbor Light Community Partners to obtain a building permit for a project approved at 2019 town meeting. Article 13 is a citizen's petition to amend the town's zoning bylaws by creating a mobile food vendor overlay district. Article 14 presents the question of whether the town should expand the size of the select board from 3 members to 5, and if so, by what process. And finally, Article 15 is the routine article for the election of town officers at this Thursday's annual town election. I ask that when we get to this article, everyone please remain in your seats to make sure that the adjournment and departure from the meeting today is an orderly process. A few ground rules before we proceed with consideration of the articles. Each article advises the meeting of the topic to be addressed. Please note the inclusion in the warrant book of the recommendations and commentary on each article. The purpose of these commentaries is to give you some idea of what each article does and why it is on the warrant. Please also note the handouts that were on your chair that make updates to the information in the warrant book. Now, articles themselves are not motions. As town meeting time helpfully explains, an article is not self-starting. It merely stakes out the limits of the area within which the meeting may act. Nothing affirmative may happen, and the moderator may not take a vote unless someone makes a motion. So for each article, I will provide a brief summary of the article, and then to expedite the meeting, see if the board, committee, or individual advancing the article in question wishes to make a motion. If a motion is made and receives a second, we will then take up any questions, comments, or proposed amendments to the motion, and ultimately vote on the motion. If no motion is made, or the motion is not seconded, we move on to the next article. To ensure that the record is clear on what town meeting is voting on, and to ensure that the town clerk can prepare complete minutes of today's meeting, I ask that any substantive amendments to a motion be made in writing. If necessary, we have a form available should any voter wish to make such a motion that they have not prepared in advance. You can get the form up here if you need to. And while a motion to amend itself may be amended, action must be taken on a secondary amendment before any further amendments can be considered. Finally, our town bylaws provide two governing rules regarding motions on the floor of town meeting. First, our town meeting does not generally permit motions for reconsideration. The only motions for reconsideration that can be considered are those made on the same day as the original vote and that present a compelling reason as determined by me, the moderator, such as a change of circumstances or the acquisition of new information. Given these narrow guardrails, a motion for reconsideration is rarely in order at Wenham town meeting. Second, our town meeting does not permit motions to take warrant articles out of order unless I, as moderator, determine that a change of circumstances, error, or discovery of new information has occurred since the posting of the warrant, bearing directly upon the purpose of the article in question. Motions to change the order of warrant articles are never in order solely to affect the timing of a vote. So absent compelling reasons, we'll be acting on the articles in the order in which they appear in the warrant. With that, let's turn to the articles. Article 1, Annual Operating Budget, Appropriations, Town and Schools. The annual operating budget for the town for fiscal year 23, the fiscal year that is beginning July 1st, 2022, and ending June 30, 2023, is set forth in Article 1. All routine expenditures required to provide town services, including costs for the town's share of the regional school district budget and shared services agreements, are organized by categories. The Finance and Advisory Committee, working with the interim town administrator, select board, and department heads, compiles the annual budget and will present a motion to authorize expenditures to operate the town and provide funding therefor. After a brief overview of the budget and the town's financial condition by Finance and Advisory Chair James Purdy on behalf of the committee, I will entertain the formal motion under Article 1. Mr. Purdy will then read the budget totals by department, as usual. If you have a question, comment, or proposed amendment on a budget line item, just say hold following reference to that budget line. After all categories have been read, we will go back through the budget on each held item. And at that point, I will recognize any person that has a question, comment, or proposed amendment. Amendments to the formal motion might include, for example, a change in the dollar amount proposed for expenditure. As these, however, are considered substantive, I will require such amendments to be in writing, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. Once all held matters have been disposed of and action taken on any proposed amendments, town meeting will then vote on the main motion as amended if applicable. So Mr. Purdy, please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. By the way, you exceeded your 7 minutes.
Thanks, Jim.
A little light note. Good afternoon. I'd like to begin my remarks with a few thank yous and acknowledgments. The first, I would like to thank the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee is an appointed committee of 5. We start our work in September and October. We meet routinely through town meeting. And I appreciate the tenor and the work that the Finance Committee does in terms of our deliberations. They're respectful, difficult, but we get our work done. This year, Mr. David Molentano is finishing his 6 years of service. He wasn't recognized before because I wanted to recognize him particularly. David has served as the liaison to the fire department and the police department And David, I want to thank you very much for your work. It's very much appreciated. I also want to recognize Jamie Coulon, who's been with us now for approximately a year and worked hand in hand with the finance committee, obviously. The other final thank you is the department heads. The department heads are critical to the finance committee on getting us information, getting information to Jamie, answering our detailed questions so we can try to figure out the best routes to go in developing and recommending a budget to you, the town meeting. Okay, let's get right into the budget now. Try to move through this in a fairly rapid fashion. So, there's good news this year, as you maybe have all read. For fiscal year 23, the Finance Committee is presenting an annual balanced budget, as we're required to do by statute, of $22,241,363. This funds, as been noted, funds both the schools and the town operations encompassed within Article 1. And this year, as in last year, it requires no override request for town operations or school operations, and we're pleased to present that. Of the 22 million, I'll be rounding off at the hundreds, so I won't have to get into much detail. Of the $22.2 million budget, town operations of $10,489,000 represents approximately 47% of the total budget. Wenham's share of the school budget of $11,752,000 represents approximately 52.8% of the budget. So the school budget exceeds our town budget, and I will make remarks on that in just a moment. A few general remarks. For the past 2 years, when the pandemic first hit, we were concerned, Finance Committee, Select Board, we were concerned that would we have a challenge with raising our taxes, not raising our taxes, but raising the collection of our real estate revenues. We are very pleased that over this year, the past year, and looking forward into 23, that those tax revenues have stayed stable throughout the whole process. And that's a very nice statement about the community of Wenham, I believe. The other thing that I want to mention too is that starting in 20 and into 21, with the pandemic, the Iron Rail property, which we have tenants, has had challenges. The tenants have had challenges in keeping their businesses going, and they pay us, the town, they pay us rent. About a total of $150,000 a year between all 5 tenants. Well, over this current year and into 23, I want to acknowledge first the Iron Rail Commission and the senior town administrators who have worked very hard with the tenants to get back on their feet, pay their rent, and that's a very positive thing for the community. A word about the schools. So, through the school utilization of excess and deficiency dollars, Chapter 70 funds, and principally, we have a reduction in Wenham's enrollment of 16 students. We have an agreement with Hamilton, and as the enrollment goes down, our appropriation for the schools goes down. So that has resulted in, for FY23, of actually a reduction of our costs in this current year by about $113,000. And that's remarkable. It's a 1% reduction, and it keeps our budget on the town side much easier to manage, quite frankly. Our total share of the budget with Hamilton is 34.6%, which is also about a % reduction from the prior year. Just a word, the Essex North Shore Agricultural School is funded by us. We have a portion of it, of course. It's $148,000 going into 23. It's a slight reduction from the prior year based upon reduced student enrollment in that program. At this point, I'd like to also thank and acknowledge the school department, the leadership of the schools, the leadership of the school committee, as we've worked on this budget together starting in November. We've had a series of meetings. We communicate about the challenges for the town.
we communicate about the challenges for the schools, and we come up in a reasonable working manner that makes things work for the schools to meet the kids' needs and for the town to meet the operational needs. And I very much appreciate that. Okay. I am going to take a drink of water, excuse me. On the revenue and expense side, let me just run through the highlights of that. The town is projecting a total net revenue of $22,397,000. That represents a growth of approximately 1.8%, or $385,000 over the current fiscal year. Primary drivers, local receipts, so-called local receipts of $1.1 million, state aid, so-called cherry sheet, revenue of $432,000, water revenue, which funds itself, $560,000, transfer from the overlay account, the assessor's overlay account of $125,000, and of course, Proposition 2.5 tax levy limit of $19.6 million. We also receive reimbursement from Hamilton for shared services that we manage. We upfront the dollars, they then reimburse their share. Those shares are typically in the range of 34% for the town of Wenham and 66% for the town of Hamilton. That's a rough number. On the expense side, total expenses of $22,241,000 represent a 1.1% increase over the current year, or $242,000. Primary drivers, they're not new to anyone probably in this room. Salary and wage increases, including our contracts with the unions, health insurance premium increases and other employee benefits, trash management fees, that goes up every year by about 5 to 8%. And this year we have a unique training requirement, state mandated training requirement for the reserve police officers. Chief DiNapoli has explained this very well to both the Finance Committee and the Select Board. It's a mandated training requirement for under the peace officers, the newly created Peace Officers Standard and Training Commission. So there's more information about that in the letter to the community. I do want to note two more things. We built in to our budget deliberations an inflationary cost of about 3.5 points, 3.5%. That is clearly not going to work. So we have to look very carefully at both the finances this year and look very carefully at 23 and anticipate that those inflationary costs for supplies, utilities, fuel, materials, et cetera, may go up. The other thing that I just want to mention is within this budget, we have improved our staffing at Town Hall in areas that were critical need. A half-time assistant accountant, 4 hours in the planning department, for example, to help with the master plan that's coming up. We have reestablished, if you will, a 0.5 permitting position. We've always had it, but with changes and realignment of staffing in Town Hall, we now have that 0.5 permitting position. It's actually being filled as we speak. The other thing I do want to mention, and you'll see it as I go through the budget, a realignment of the assessor's office and a shared service with Hamilton. And we can talk about that in detail if we have the hold on that. A few more words. Free cash and capital expenses. Free cash is certified dollars that we have underexpended or we have over revenue, and it's kind of a balance. I suppose in private business, it's a profit and loss statement. See where you are. So this year, our free cash has been certified at $1,158,000. That is more than what we received last year. That free cash is going to be used, and it's in Article 2, fully explained, for our capital expenses. We put aside as our best fiscal practice $250,000 into another reserve account for unanticipated costs, emergencies. And this year, and by the way, we are not using free cash to supplement operations. For the past, since I've been on the Finance Committee and prior to that, we had often pulled from free cash and put 250, 300, or whatever the number may be, to help us with operations. We're not doing that this year. We are able to incorporate that within the tax levy limit. The other thing with free cash this year, which is positive, we're taking the remaining money after you deduct capital, the $250,000, $383,000, we're holding in the free cash account reserve to help us with the fiscal year 24 budget, which is in some ways just around the corner. The American Rescue Plan, that's ARPA that the Senator mentioned. The town of Wenham has received $1.5 million of so-called ARPA monies. They're federal monies, and they can be used for such things as follows. Facility upgrades, recovery of lost revenues, IT upgrades, infrastructure, water, sewage, and so on. Enhanced lost revenues, healthcare services, safety, and so on. Now, these monies are not part of the operational budget that you have before us. They are controlled. They come to the community. They are overseen by the select board. We make decisions, finance, and the select board will be working going forward of how best to use these monies. Add a benefit to an obvious benefit to the community of how those monies will be of our assistance. Finally, the anticipated tax rate. There's a little statement about that. This is anticipated. The tax rate is actually set in October, November of this calendar year, but we're anticipating a 2.35% increase, which equals 46 cents on the tax rate. Our current tax rate is $19.58. It's projected at this point to go up to $20.04. Just as an example, a home that is assessed at $650,000, the tax will increase by approximately $300 annually, or $75 quarterly. That would be the projected increase on a $650,000 assessed value. As the moderator mentioned, we'll go through I will read each cost center line item, and you can raise a hold at the end of that process. We'll answer the holds as best as we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Before we get to the reading of the budget, I invite Interim Superintendent Eric Tracy and Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Administration Vincent Leone to make their presentation on the school district budget.
Thank you, Mr. Smerich, and thank you for the opportunity to address the citizens of Wenham. I'd be remiss if I did not thank our families, our students, our educators, and administrators for the work they have done to get us back into school and to keep us in school. Also, I'd like to thank our Assistant Superintendent of Finance, Vincent Leone, who has been masterful this year at developing the budget. I would also like to thank the town administrator, members of the school committee, select board, and finance board, and many others who have had a hand in working to present a fiscally responsible budget to you today. As you may know, I've been superintendent for 6 short months, but I am proud of the way all of our boards came together on multiple occasions to keep our vision shared and our work transparent. This slide is represented in the handout that you received today. It shows the budget for the FY23 school year and an important investment towards the future on behalf of our children, which I will outline clearly in a few moments. You will notice that the assessment to the town of Wenham is $11,752,145, a decrease of about 0.96%. As you may remember, the FY21 budget was reduced by the school committee by approximately $1.24 million because there was information received from the state that our state aid would be cut by 20%. Looking back, over 22 positions and a number of programs were cut due to this anticipated decrease. This year and last year, we were able to make some gains and recover some losses. This slide represents some of those changes within our current FY23 budget. Fiscal year 21 ended with a surplus of approximately $3.1 million. Due to COVID, we were out of school more than we were in school, and the usual supplies and goods used daily in schools were not purchased. There were also a number of positions that we were not able to fill due to COVID, and some unexpected increase in Chapter 70 state aid. Through the years, there's been a push for the school district to open and fund our other post-employment benefits, or OPEB account. An OPEB account is an investment account that in time can be used to offset payments for benefits for retirees. Because an OPEB account doesn't currently exist for the school district, these expenses are paid out of the district operating budget. What's important to note is that our future liability is in excess of $50 million. We propose using approximately $2 million in excess funds to fund our OPEB investment account and to begin to build a tool for our children to offset future OPEB-related costs. We also propose to utilize approximately $325,000 to make some much-needed repairs around our schools, including some required ADA updates, like a handicap ramp for this building. I would also like to point out that $775 of the $3.1 million will be returned to the towns. This is a FY23 gross summary broken down by required Mass Department of Education categories. It doesn't include the debt expense. The total is $42,859,392. Next slide. There are currently 4 projects that represent previously approved debt to the towns in the amount of $571,960, of which Wenham's portion is $197,805. Next slide, please. We have worked to present a budget to our towns that meets the needs of our children while also staying under previous increases. As you can see, the overall assessment for the town of Wenham is 0.96 decrease compared to last year. I am proud to represent the students, families, staff, and faculty of the Hamilton Wenham School District. We have been successful during the last 6 months at stabilizing our district, and I believe we are well on our way to developing stronger schools and improving our facilities. As you may know, you've been invited into the process to build a new Cutler Elementary School by the Mass School Building Authority. We also have an athletics field improvement committee that is working regularly to find ways to fund much needed improvements to our athletic fields and facilities. These projects will need all of our support over the next few years. I look forward to working with everyone in our communities to make our schools amazing. Thank you for the opportunity to present the FY23 school budget today.
Thank you, Superintendent Tracy. Before we proceed to the reading of the budget, I just want to introduce Warren Goldberg, also of KP Law, who has joined us on stage to my left, one of our town council. Mr. Purdy, if you wish to make a formal motion under Article 1, I will entertain the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Let me move my things here. The motion reads, I move that the town vote to appropriate the sum of $22,241,363 to defray the town's expenses for fiscal year 23, the 12-month period beginning July 1, 2022 and ending June 30, 2023, including expenses for the town and regional school districts, all for the purposes and in the amounts set forth under Article 1 of the warrant, and for such purposes to transfer the sum of $125,000 from the assessor's overlay account and raise from taxation the sum of $19,602,878.
Is there a second? The motion has been made and seconded. After Mr. Purdy reviews the budget categories and amounts, we will consider any holds and then take the vote. A vote on this motion requires a simple majority. Mr. Purdy, would you please read through the budget? Yes.
Okay, as is our tradition, I will read the total of each item by number. So if I miss one, I'm sure you'll call me. Okay. Moderator, $50. Selectmen, $12,203. Town administrator, $149,257. Finance and advisory committee, $250. Reserve fund, Mass General Law, Chapter 40, $125,000. Municipal audit, $35. Assessors. What did I say?
Jim said 35.
I want to reduce the budget. $35,000, my apologies. My apologies. Assessors. Total assessors, $121,755. Tax title expense, $10,000. Finance department, $303,449. Town council legal services, $60,000. Information technology, $117,161. Town hall, $231,920. Town clerk, $112,447. So hold on town clerk. Planning and land use, $87,033. Facilities management, $173,360. Town report, $6,500. Iron rail property, $48,200. Total general government, $1,593,585. Police. Total police, $1,682,512. Fire, total fire, $840,942. Permitting inspectional services, $102,133. Tree warden, $29,982. Total protection of persons and property, $2,655,569. Schools. Total Hamilton Wenham Regional School District, our share of the cost, $11,752,145. The Regional Vocational School District, $148,645. Total education, $11,900,790. All right, highway and public works. Total highway, $883,173. Snow removal, $107,345. Street lighting, $18,000. Refuse collection and disposal, $485,043. Cemetery, $11,484. Total Department of Public Works, $1,505,045. Health and Human Services. Board of Health, $40,731. Council on Aging, $133,111. Veterans Department, $17,022. Total Health and Human Services, $190,864. Culture and Recreation, Joint Library, go down to the bottom of the page, $1,024,896. The Joint Rec, $100,323. Historic District Commission expenses, $200. Total Culture and Recreation, $1,125,419. Fixed charges. Essex County Retirement Assessment, $20,582. Retirement, $950,214. Total employee benefits, $945,528. Hold on employee benefits.
Sorry, I meant the hold to be on item 911. Sorry for that.
One more time, the retirement, you want to hold on retirement 911.
Thank you.
Thank you. I missed, yep. Okay, where are we? FICA Medicare, $68,000. General insurance, $180,000. OPEB, other post-employment benefits, $80,000. Total fixed charges, $2,244,304. All right. Town debt, principal and interest. Subtotal principal, $453,113. Subtotal interest, $52,482. Total town debt, $505,595. All right. Total general fund, $21,681,171. We go to the water fund, self-funding. Bottom of the page and the second of the page. Water fund, salaries, $257,743. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Water fund, total water fund is on page, the next page. I misspoke on that, my apologies. Total water fund, $560,193. Total general plus the water fund, $22,241,363. So we have a hold on town clerk.
So by my count, there are 2 holds. I've been informed by the assistant moderators there were no holds made in the multi-purpose room. The first hold is on item 161, town clerk. Who would like to speak on item 161?
Internet 3 Dexter Lane. Just wanted to find out the large increase on for town clerk. Just, I guess, an explanation. It seems like when I'm looking, it's not a fixed cost, so I'm just trying to find out the larger increase.
Mr. Purdy?
Mr. Schoenberger will speak to that question.
Yeah, the increase is due to Wenham needing to staff 2 election districts, precincts, and this year they're state elections, and so we will be holding 2 elections, each staffed by double the amount of staff compared to usual years, and that
any other comments to be made on item 161, town clerk? Hearing none. The second hold, line item 911, retirement. Who would like to speak on this?
Jared Ward, 24 Mayflower.
Please go ahead.
It's my understanding that the contributions to the Essex County retirement system are driven by a complex actuarial formula that has something to do with the funding status, actuarial funding status of the fund, combined with the number of employees that we have that are part of the fund. Given that the stock market has done so well, I'm very distressed that our contribution is going up, and this line item is increasing at a galloping rate far higher than any other expense category. I'd like to know who serves on the retirement board representing the town of Wenham, A. B, what is the funding status of the retirement fund in terms of a percentage of the actuarial? Is it fully funded? Is it 80% funded? I know we had a terrific scandal with this fund about 20 years ago, and it was my understanding that it was being fixed. Well, it's clearly not. So I guess my first question, who represents the town on the retirement board?
Mr. Purdy? If you know.
Do our best to answer this, sir. Treasurer collector represents the board for the town of Wenham.
What is the actuarial status of the fund in terms of percentage funded?
Mr. Purdy, do we have that information?
Approximately 6.5%.
Excuse me, does that mean it's 94% funded, or does that mean it's only funded to the tune of 6%? That's clearly not an accurate figure.
Okay. First of all, let's keep things in order, please. If Mr. Purdy has that information at the ready. No, we don't.
I do not. I'm sorry. At the ready. I think it's something we could follow up on. I'm sure.
I rest my case in that clearly this is a number that we should have to hand when we're submitting 10% annual increases to this fund. And I think it's something, and I'd like to have a follow-up on it.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on item 911, retirement? Hearing none, and having dealt with all holds, we will now vote on the motion under Article 1. A vote on this motion requires a simple majority. So, all those in favor, please raise your vote cards. Thank you. All those against, please raise your card. I'm just waiting on the assistant moderator. And the motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to Article 2. Use of free cash to fund fiscal year 2023 capital improvement program. Article 2 seeks authorization for the town to use free cash to fund FY 2023 capital improvement program projects. If David Reed of the FinCom wishes to make the formal motion under Article 2, I will entertain the motion.
I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash such sums of money to fund the town's fiscal 2023 capital improvement program, including the acquisition, equipping, and all other incidental related costs of items A through B, in the amounts and for the purposes as printed in the warrant.
Motion has been made and seconded. Michelle, if you could advance to the motion slide, please, so we have it on the screen. Thank you. Just as with Article 1, Mr. Reed will now review the capital items and amounts. If you wish to address any of these items separately, please say hold. After Mr. Reed completes the review of the capital items, we will consider any holds and take the vote. Mr. Reed, will you please read through the capital items?
Item A, Public Works, Roads, $85,000. Item B, Public Works, Garage Doors, $17,000. Item C, Public Works, Truck, $76,326. Item D, Public Works Backhoe, $36,000. Item E, Public Works Loader, $35,000. Item F, Public Works Trackless, $31,000. Item G, Police Cruiser, $47,757. Item H, Police Key Card, $10,500. Item I, Police Parking Lot Fence, $10,395. Item J, Fire Administrative Vehicle, $45,000. Item K, Fire SCBA Air Tanks, $15,400. Item L, Cemetery Fence, $19,000. Item M, Facilities IT Network, $42,000. Item N, Facilities IT HVAC, $34,000. Item O, Facilities IT Security, $15,347. And last item P, Facilities Senior Center Painting, $5,400. For a total of $524,925.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Hearing no holds, we will now vote on the motion under Article 2. A vote on this motion requires a simple majority. All those in favor, please raise your vote cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your cards. Thank you. Bear with me as I consult with the assistant moderator. The motion passes unanimously. Article 3, prior year bills. Article 3 seeks authorization for the town to pay 4 bills from service providers, which bills predate the current fiscal year. As noted in the warrant book, there are 4 unpaid bills outstanding totaling $7,085.03. If Susan Malin of the FinCom wishes to make the formal motion under Article 3, I will entertain the motion.
I move that the town vote to appropriate a sum of money to pay bills of a previous fiscal year in the amount and for the purposes as printed in the warrant, with such funds to be raised by taxation.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Just as with Articles 1 and 2, Susan Malin will review the unpaid bills and amounts. If you wish to address any of these items separately, please say hold. After Ms. Malin completes the review of the unpaid bills, we will consider any holds and take the vote. Ms. Malin, would you please read through the unpaid bills?
William H. Solomon, attorney at law, $5,989. Kelly and Ryan Associates, Inc., $866.15. USIQ, $189.13. Schwab Incorporated, $40.75 for a total of $7,085.03.
Thank you, Ms. Malin. Hearing no holds, we will now vote on the motion under Article 3. A vote on this motion does require a 4/5 vote. As such, unless it's unanimous, we will do a counted vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Please floor your cards. All those opposed? Okay, just give me 1 second. The motion passes unanimously. No need to do a count. Thank you. Before I entertain a motion under Article 4, it is this moderator's impression that we may be able to expedite consideration of Articles 4 through 7. They are routine articles appearing each year and about which there's generally little or no debate. Therefore, I will ask the meeting whether it would like to take all such articles together, which approach is sometimes referred to as a consent calendar. For each article, I will read the article number and general purpose. If you want to consider that article separately for any reasons, please say hold after I read the article. If 5 voters rise in support of the hold, the article will be removed from the consent calendar. We will then vote on any articles remaining in the consent calendar as a batch, and then turn back to the held article, if any, for separate consideration and voting. So, Article 4 proposes acceptance of cemetery and other trust funds received in fiscal year 2021. Article 5 proposes a transfer of $6,000 from the cemetery sale of lots fund to the cemetery perpetual care fund for costs related to the maintenance of the town's cemeteries. Article 6 proposes to transfer $35,000 from the water operating budget to the water capital reserve fund for future infrastructure replacements. And Article 7 proposes acceptance of Chapter 90 funds and authorizes the town to undertake major road projects qualifying for such funding. I will now recognize David Molitano of the FinCom, hearing no holds, to make the formal motion under the consent calendar, which consists of Articles 4 through 7.
I move that Articles 4 through 7 be approved as printed in the warrant.
Is there a second? Second. The motion has been made and seconded. We will now vote on the motion to approve the consent calendar. A vote on this motion requires a simple majority. All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Article 8, the annual CPA reservation and appropriations. Article 8 proposes appropriation of the Community Preservation Act budget for the upcoming fiscal year, including reservations for each of the 3 purposes of the Act: open space, including land for recreational use, historic resources, and community housing, as well as for debt service and administrative expenses of the Community Preservation Committee. This year, the Community Preservation Committee has also recommended appropriations from the Community Preservation Fund for a limited number of projects. Thus, the article has 4 subparts as set forth in the Warrant book. By way of some background, the town adopted the Community Preservation Act in 2005. The town assesses a 3% surcharge on the tax levy on real property for community preservation purposes, and also receives state matching funds. Each year, the Community Preservation Committee evaluates the town's community preservation needs. A recommendation from the Community Preservation Committee is required for the appropriation of CPA funds. I will now call on Patrick Waddell, Chair of the CPC, for the report of the Community Preservation Committee. Then I will allow Mr. Waddell to read through all the CPC motions. Mr. Waddell, please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I want to thank you all for coming to town meeting, and I also want to thank the committee members: Janet Burt, Peter Clay, Elizabeth Craig McCormick, Dan Curran, Alden Drake, Barbara Locke, Leo Mastranzi, and Tom Starr. Because we are a 3% community, we pay a surcharge 3% of our property tax bill. We are eligible for additional state matching. This year, through our local receipts, the money that you paid, we raised $450,611. Because we're a 3% community, we received $400,744 as our match for an 88.9%. This is the most I've seen since I've been on the committee for 8 years. This was a fantastic year. The state match has been increasing over the past 5 years, but really jumped this year. Thank you to the legislature. The CPC brings 4 recommendations to annual town meeting 2022. The first is administrative. It's just moving funds to the proper reserve bucket for FY22, the excess that we received, and estimating reserves for FY23. Next, we have the payment on the debt service due on the bond used to fund the historic preservation of Town Hall. We only have 5 payments remaining, including this one. Third is the historic preservation of the community house as part of their Centennial Square project. This year, the community house is celebrating their 100-year anniversary. It actually occurred last year, but COVID prevented them from celebrating, so this is their celebration year. And finally, the CPC is recommending CPA funds to rehabilitate the Wenham Village Improvement Society's Tea House tennis courts, which are free for all Wenham residents to use. All votes by the committee were unanimous to recommend these articles to town meeting.
Thank you, Patrick. Mr. Waddell will now read the 4 CPC motions. Here again, if you have a question, a comment, or a proposed amendment, just say hold following reference to that item, and we will handle all holds before proceeding to a vote. And one other note, as Mr. Waddell just mentioned, the Community Preservation Committee has voted to recommend approval of all sections of Article 8. So, go ahead, Mr. Waddell.
Excellent. Thank you. Article 8, Section 1. I move that the town vote to transfer, reserve, and appropriate monies from the Community Preservation Fund consistent with the requirements of GL Chapter 44B, Section 6 as follows. Transfer from Community Preservation Fund FY22 budgetary reserves the sums set forth to true up the amount reserved in FY22 for each purpose of the CPA. $38,336 to the Historic Resources Reserve. $38,336 to the Open Space and Recreation Reserve. $38,336 to the Community Housing Reserve. And further, transfer the reserve from the Community Preservation Fund FY23 annual revenues for each purpose of the CPA. $54,000 to the Historic Resources Reserve, $54,000 to the Open Space and Recreation Reserve, $54,000 to the Community Housing Reserve, and $375,000 to the FY23 budgetary reserve, and appropriate from FY23 annual revenues the sum of $8,500 for CPC administrative expenses. Article 8, Section 2. I further move that the town vote to transfer from the Community Preservation Fund the total sum of $114,850 for FY23 debt service on the borrowing for the rehabilitation of the historic town hall, of which $86,136 shall come from the Historic Resources Reserve and $29,714 shall come from the FY22 CPA budgetary reserve. Article 8, Section 3. I further move that the town vote to transfer the sum of $75,000 from the FY23 CPA budgetary reserve for the purpose of the historic preservation and rehabilitation of the community house located at 284 Bay Road, Hamilton, Massachusetts, specifically to replace the existing handicap ramp, install 2 lampposts on the walkway, recreate the stone steps, replace the flagpole, and associated site work as laid out in the estimate dated February 11th, 2022. Article 8, Section 4. I further move that the town vote to transfer the total sum of $46,850 from the FY23 CPA budgetary reserve for the purpose of the rehabilitation of the tennis courts at the Wenham Village Improvement Society's Tea House, open to all Wenham residents on Monument Street, specifically to repair cracks, resurface the court, and significantly extend the life of the courts and all incidental and related expenses.
Thank you, Patrick. Before we address the one hold that has been made, we technically need a second for the motions Mr. Waddell has made. Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. The hold was on section 3. Please state your name and address.
Virginia Rogers, 6 William Fairfield Drive.
Please go ahead, Ms. Rogers.
And this is simply a question about the amounts expended, and I'm wondering if this was matched or in any other way added to the contribution from Hamilton for this project, since
Mr.
the
Waddell?
community house is in Hamilton.
We did not require a match from Hamilton. Hamilton has approved $150,000 at this morning's town meeting, but we did not put a requirement that they do so.
So that $450,000 will be new funding for their renovation and preservation of this, is that correct?
The $75,000?
The total, the 450 and the 75 is the total amount that will be spent on this.
I'm sorry, excuse me, yes, it's 150, so Hamilton.
Oh, 150, I'm sorry, I thought you said 450.
So that 150 from Hamilton will be used for this project as well, yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Julia Campbell, 7 Birch Road.
Go ahead, Ms. Campbell.
I really encourage you to support the preservation and the budgetary reserve for the community house. I know that it benefits a lot of the residents of Wenham, even though it's located in Hamilton. My daughter is one in particular. I know a lot of people in this room have children that have gone to either the daycare, benefited from Stage 24, benefited from the programs of the community house. So I would really, really encourage the town of Wenham to support that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Anyone else wishing to speak on subsection or section 3 of Article 8 before we proceed? Okay, there are no other comments to be made. The town council has just brought something to my attention about this motion, which I need to address with the chair. So please give us 2 minutes while I discuss the matter with town council. Thank you.
Feel free to stretch your legs while we do this. Don't go far.
Okay. We've settled the issue, so I'll give everyone a minute to return to your seats, please. All right, I'll call the meeting back to order, please. The issue that legal counsel has raised has been addressed. There's no need to make any changes to the motion. The motion has been made and seconded. As I said, all holds have been addressed. So we will now vote on the motion under Article 8. A vote on the motion requires a simple majority. All those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. All those opposed? The motion passes unanimously. And thank you, Patrick. Before we move on to the next article, I just want to note that this is the final year of Mr. Waddell's last term as an at-large member of the CPC. We thank you for your service to that committee, including as its chair. Thank you.
And I would just like to thank everyone that I have served with for the past 8 years, with a special tribute to Arthur Bird, who we lost in 2019. It's been a great group, and thank you very much.
Moving on to Article 9, amend the solicitor bylaw of the town bylaws. If Catherine Harrison of the Select Board wishes to make the formal motion under Article 9, I will entertain the motion.
I move that the town vote to amend the general bylaws, section 189-9, the solicitor bylaw, by inserting a new subsection C as printed in the warrant.
Is there a second? The motion has been made and seconded. Would anyone like to speak on this motion? Seeing no one approach the microphones and no one coming in from the multi-purpose room, we'll now vote on the motion under Article 9. A vote in favor will add the new provision to the bylaws, whereas a vote against will make no change to the bylaws. A vote on this motion requires a simple majority. All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. The motion passes by majority. Article 10, amend the dog licensing bylaw. If David Reed of the FinCom wishes to make the formal motion under Article 10, I will entertain the motion.
I move that the town vote to amend the general bylaws, section 100-3B, dog licensing, and delete 100-4 from the general bylaws effective January 1, 2023, and approve Article 10 as printed in the warrant.
Is there a second? The motion has been made and seconded. Would anyone like to speak on the Article 10 motion? Seeing no one approach the microphones and no one coming in from the multi-purpose room, we will now vote on the motion under Article 10. A vote in favor will revise the bylaws regarding dog licensing fees, whereas a vote against will make no change to the bylaws. A vote on this motion requires a simple majority. All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. The motion passes by majority. Article 11, accept the dog licensing statute. If David Reed of the FinCom wishes to make the formal motion under Article 11, I will entertain the motion.
I move that the town vote to accept the second sentence of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 140, Section 139C, to eliminate a dog licensing fee for those 70 years of age and older, and amend the general bylaws by inserting a new subsection in Section 100-3, setting forth said sentence, with such bylaw amendment to be effective on January 1st, 2023, all as printed in the warrant.
Is there a second? The motion has been made and seconded. Would anyone like to speak on this motion? Seeing no one approach the microphones or coming in from the multipurpose room, we will now vote on the motion under Article 11. A vote in favor will add the new provision to the bylaws, whereas a vote against will make no change to the bylaws. A vote on this motion requires simple majority. All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Article 12, amend, vote, and term of the Community Preservation Act grant agreement with Harbor Light Community Partners Incorporated. Before we get to the motion on this article, a word of explanation. This article relates to a grant agreement that the town authorized at the 2019 town meeting. I understand from interim town administrator Tom Younger that the building permit has already been issued, and that the article is a formality to provide that the permit was issued within the time the time allotted under the grant agreement that the town previously approved. If Gary Cheeseman of the Select Board wishes to make the formal motion under Article 12, I will entertain the motion.
I move that the town vote to amend the agreement with Harbor Light Community Partners, Inc., as printed in the warrant.
Is there a second? The motion has been made and seconded. Would anyone like to speak on the motion? Seeing no one approach the microphones or coming in from the multipurpose room, we will now vote on the motion under Article 12. A vote on this motion requires a simple majority. All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? Bear with me, I'm just checking with the assistant moderator. The motion passes unanimously. Moving on to Article 13, Citizens Petition, Create Zoning District for Mobile Food Vendors. As I said, this article is a citizen's petition. As such, I invite the lead petitioner, Benjamin Timon, to make a brief presentation of no more than 5 minutes on the petition. After that, I will invite Ann Weeks from the Planning Board to deliver the board's recommendation on the article, as that board had not yet voted on a recommendation at the time the warrant went to print. Finally, I will ask Town Council to provide a brief comment on the petition as they have conducted a review. Then, if Mr. Timon wishes to make a formal motion under Article 13, I will entertain it. Mr. Timon, go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and greetings to my fellow Wenham residents. Ben Timon, 236 Larch Row. I'm a 19-year Wenham resident. And my clients in this case are Brittany and Christopher Poole of Hamilton, who are going to be coming in as visitors, I think, in a moment in the back. Brittany Poole grew up in Wenham, and Christopher grew up in Hamilton, and they're both Hamilton-Wenham high school graduates, just for the meeting's information. And they retained my firm to put forward an amendment proposed to the zoning bylaws that would permit, on a really very limited basis, as I'll explain, mobile food vendors in the town of Wenham. In the warrant article itself, it lists the proposed zoning bylaw, and I'm obviously not going to go through all of it because, as you've seen, it's lengthy. I hope that you've had the chance to review it, or that you will now, and give it your fair consideration. A few things I'd like to point out on the merits of it are that it includes about 15 different conditions that would be required for any applicant for a mobile food vendor license to meet before they could be considered. If you look at Section 2 of the proposed bylaw, I just want to read the beginning of that, which says, the town of Wenham, acting through its select board, may authorize mobile food vendors to operate within the overlay district, and that those vendors must comply with certain requirements. So among the 15 or so requirements that an eligible applicant would need to meet include things like that they comply with all applicable provisions of the general bylaws, all local and state taxes, which would include the Wenham meals tax. Another condition has to do with traffic and pedestrian safety, that there be no drive-through vendors, walk-up only. Another one has to do with trash and recycling requirements. Another is lighting. Another is police direction being followed, signage, that order and decorum always be maintained, that there be no alcoholic beverages, and several other things, including this important one I think that people have asked about, that the application must include, this is section 4.8, written authorization of the property owner, irrespective of whether the property is publicly or privately owned. Another one is that any applicant needs to meet all other regulatory requirements, which include specifically in Wenham, approval from the Board of Health. So there are a whole host of protections and limitations to this. And then the biggest thing that really limits this particular bylaw and truly does make it a pilot program is that it limits the number of food vendor licenses that could be granted to 3. And that's by location. It's 1 license per location. So 3 locations are the maximum that the select board would in its discretion, be able to grant. So that brings me to the overlay district. This bylaw, as the moderator pointed out, would, if passed, create a mobile food vendor overlay district. That also is in the nature of a very limited and modest pilot program. The warrant article itself proposes 3 sections of town. One is Gordon College, which I hasten to add is not a sponsor of this, but seemed like a sensible place to have that overlay district if the college gave permission for food vendors or a food vendor to be there. The other is Central, is the town line, so essentially the Henderson's Plaza, Fallon's Garage across from that to Pingree Park, which of course is owned by the town of Wenham. And then the third overlay district portion within the warrant article is Richdale's in West Wenham. As part of the public hearing process that we went through, we heard some skepticism of that particular part of the overlay district. So in my motion, which I provided last Monday to the moderator, we're dropping that from the proposal. And so what is already a fairly limited warrant article will become even more narrow in the motion. The other piece of feedback that we took on board came from the Wenham Museum, which has historically had food trucks there for Wenham Day and other occasions. Those have been granted by the Board of Health under an existing seasonal permit for food trucks. And the other change that I have in the motion is that there would be no change with respect to the status quo on those types of owners like the Wenham Museum that have had food trucks in the past. So those would be exempt.
Thank you, Mr. Tynan.
Thank you. Just one quick thing. If anyone is in the question and answer period, if the moderator permits it, has questions about the process, because that has come up, I'm more than happy if the moderator allows to answer those types of process questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tynan. Why don't you stand close in case we have such questions. As I said, I will now invite Ann Weeks of the Planning Board to offer the Planning Board's recommendation on the article.
Happy Spring, Wenham. And before I do, I want to ask permission of the moderator to express my great thanks to Virginia Rogers for her years of service on the board and the few years that I've been privileged to serve on the planning board for the town. She has been just a solid and hardworking member, and I just wanted to appreciate her. I don't think she was here earlier when the town did so. So thank you very much.
Thank you again, Ms. Rogers. Go ahead, Ms. Weeks.
Thank you. So you've heard from my respected friend, Mr. Timon, about the proposed overlay district. And I wanted to just provide you with a little background on the planning board's vote. We voted 4-0 not to support this overlay district, and there's a handout. We did so on March 10th, which was after the warrant went to print. So there's a handout on your chair that goes through the reasonings that were that came forward from the board members at the time we did discuss this. The applicants met with us twice, and the first time it was apparent that this applicant wanted to put the food trucks on the gas station parking lot near Pingree Park. We expressed reservations about what appeared to us to be a spot zoning and asked them to think about how to be a little bit more creative about thinking about where to place such an overlay. We also said that we are about to engage, thank you very much to everyone in Town Hall who's helped facilitate this, about to engage a consultant to do our long-range plan for the town, and that this kind of economic development zone might be best considered during that process. Then we heard back again with the motion that you have printed in your, or the article that you have printed in your warrant book. We were told at the time of the town public hearing on this that we would not be able to recommend any changes to the districts. We did hear a fair amount of opposition from people living in the Route 97 corridor who happened to be on the planning board meeting that night for another matter. And we were concerned a little bit that we hadn't heard anything from residents who lived near or in the other districts. Not sure whether there was any outreach to them, that we didn't hear any support. We also didn't hear anything else. So although we felt that this was an interesting concept, I'm not going to read all the bullets, I'm just going to touch on them briefly. We felt that this was an interesting concept. We strongly agree that the town needs economic development ideas. This kind of overlay we felt was better left for discussion as part of the master planning project. We had general concerns about traffic, because even though they're walking up, people are going to have to park somewhere if they're driving by and see a food truck and want to stop. Trash parking in residential areas, odors, if you are thinking about living near a food truck and it's there from April to October, you may confront those things. And then process issues, and this is my last point. There's no public hearing piece of this process. It doesn't come before the planning board for a hearing, and I don't believe there's a public hearing before the select board. So those were the reasons why we had 4 members voting not to move this forward, or not recommend it. We had 1 abstention. We had one of our members, actually several of our members are attorneys who are in local practice, and one of them had been approached by the applicant and had referred him to Mr. Timon, and he felt that his vote on this, one way or the other, would be, he wanted to recuse himself for ethical reasons. So that is the planning board's recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Weeks. Can I just ask that you stand close as well in case there are any comments for the board? I'm just going to correct something I said a minute ago. Town council will address any questions regarding legality, but they are not going to make any remarks at this time. So, Mr. Timon, if you wish to make a motion, I will entertain that.
If I can get my iPhone to go in the right direction so I can see what I wrote here. Okay. I move that the town amend the zoning bylaw to 1, add a mobile food vendor section as set forth in Exhibit A to the petition as reprinted as Article 13 in the warrant, except that Section 5, called exceptions, shall also include those uses previously allowed solely by virtue of temporary or seasonal food service permits issued by the Wenham Board of Health. And 2, create a mobile food vendor overlay district that encompasses only the first 2 maps set forth in Appendix 1 to the petition as reprinted in the warrant article, i.e. excluding the 3rd map depicting parcels in West Wenham. Thank you.
Is there a second? The motion has been made and seconded. Would anyone like to speak on the motion?
Gary Cheeseman, 75 Pleasant Street. Just want to point out that I believe this is a very premature action here, that there was originally a request for the position at the Felon Garage. Because of the spot zoning information, it ballooned up to 3 different areas. I point out that the petitioner didn't notify anybody that was abutting or within those districts. I'd further point out that under written right now, 4.8, yes, they would have to get permission to put the food truck on that property, but if you happen to be next door, you have no say in this matter. Furthermore, I can't believe that the town would accept a petition here that has not been fully reviewed and vetted by the town administrators and our other committees. Also, understand that this petition will put in place something that will make a 2/3 vote next time to make any changes. So the 3 supposedly pilot vendors will actually have a monopoly until the town meeting gets a 2/3 majority to change it. Also, they propose in here a $500 fee. I think that's the matter that the select board and the town ought to decide on what the fee structure is. And last, I point out that there's other minor issues such as the signs that are non-conformance with our current bylaws, and the fact that there's other things that haven't even been addressed here, such as noise and music. So if it's going to be like a ice cream truck, you as a neighbor will have no say in it. Your neighbor may have gone away to give permission for 3 weeks or whatever, and you'll be sitting there listening to music all day long without any say on it. So I think we should go with the planning board's recommendation. That was no, 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 and say no to this one. We can put this into the long-range master plan. Thank you.
In the rear.
Yes. Jonathan Prescott, 9 Hull Street, 30-year resident of Wenham.
Go ahead, Mr. Prescott.
Thank you. I came today to hear Gordon College's input on support for this overlay district because I'm an abutter to Gordon College, and I was not notified of this proposal. And so here I am to hear their input because clearly there's some import here for student life on the campus, and I'm sure something that perhaps they could support, but it seems to me that there hasn't been enough due diligence to get them on board to support this proposal, so that then as an abutter I could understand how they would support this overlay district, which is right now drawn for their complete campus. Obviously, Hull Street has a lot of traffic coming from Beverly. Today, if you were to drive by, you would see 60 to 60 plus people there supporting a ball game, parking along Hull Street, and et cetera, and with many pedestrians and parking cones put down. So it's very challenging parking there at times with the bus drop-off of teams, et cetera. And so, yes, indeed, there would be a challenge if there was a food truck parked on Hull Street. So therein, if there was ever to be a food truck at Gordon College supporting something like that event, Gordon would need to put it in their parking lot. They really need to weigh in on this before they would get, I believe, they would get my support. And so I would also encourage that we support the planning board's no confidence or non-interest at this time in this vote.
Mr. Prescott? In the front here.
Jennifer Carr, 5 Meridian Road. My daughter was really looking forward to a taco truck, to be honest. We live right off of 97. But that's not my point. I work at several universities. They have food trucks out every day for lunch. They're not loud, they're not obnoxious. They're a cheap way for people to get some decent food and get a huge diversity of food. We need diversity in this community, and we need to start bringing in commercial enterprises. And we have to start somewhere. This is a small pilot program, which I didn't know about till it turned up in the warrant. But I think a lot of the issues that I read in that bulletin about noise and smell and traffic, I don't think it's gonna happen. It doesn't happen at Harvard, it doesn't happen at Tufts, it doesn't happen at Salem State or Mass Art, which are all the universities that I teach at, and all of them have food trucks. Think about your kids who want to go out and eat. I mean, this is a perfect place for them to go down to Penry Park, spend $5, get a meal, and sit out in the sun. I mean, we should be encouraging that type of thing, not voting against it.
Thank you. In the rear. Go ahead, sir.
Tom Tanis, 5 Eaton Road in Wenham.
Go ahead, Mr. Tanis.
I've been a resident for 60 years, and I remember many things going on. I've served on several committees of this community, including being a select person for 8 years. And we have had different proposals come before us, but we've always sent those to the planning board, number one, because that's the proper place for it to go. Not here first. Secondly, I'm still waiting to hear who the petitioners are. I want the petitioners who signed the petition, not the two standing there who will benefit from the passage of this document.
Sir, please do not refer to the petitioner as a tool. Thank you. Please continue.
Secondly, I am concerned about the value of neighborhood properties. Originally, the map, the third one, that was very nicely amended, eliminated all the people living, or the properties living in that area, but kept the store area. I well remember at a planning board meeting many years ago when that store asked for a gas station. And the community got up and said, no. A food truck may offer food. I don't expect it to be that cheap. Nothing is cheap these days. You know? And I just think, I worry about the taxation problem. I'm an assessor. I would have to consider every applicant who comes before me and says, my value has been reduced because I have a food truck sitting next door or sitting in practically in my front car. That would cause us to cause a reduction in their taxes or tax value, and that has to be considered by all of us. We are a residential community, and over the years, we have maintained that residential community attitude. We have certain blocks right now that offer people some minor commercial programs. I think that's enough for the town of Wenham. Let's keep it the way it is and has been, and for many of us have come to Wenham for that very purpose, that it is residential. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tanis. In the front.
Kristen Crockett, 5 Birch Road. I have a question regarding any projected revenues from this project. I understand that Wenham has exercised the local meal options tax, but it's unclear to me if the food trucks would be paying that tax to Wenham or if they would be paying it where the vehicle is registered.
I'm going to direct that question to Ms. Weeks of the Planning Board in the first instance, if she knows. Yeah, please do.
That information was not presented to the planning board, and it's not really in the planning board's purview, so I guess I would have to ask the assessors or the finance department if they have that information for you.
if anyone from the FinCom has any information on this, I'll invite them to chime in.
This is speculation. If the food truck is in the property of Wenham and is selling goods, services within the property of Wenham, we do have a meals tax that was enacted 2 years ago, and we would receive meals tax revenues from that, is my speculation, but I'm not 100% sure. And I've been reminded that we would get money from the state back on that meals tax process.
I do support development. We need some more development. We need commercial development. But the reason we need that is to generate revenue. And so with the master plan coming, if this isn't going to generate revenue, and I'm actually doing a municipal finance class right now, and I asked this question, and nobody seemed to know the answer. The economic development coordinator out of Marlborough said that she believes it goes to where the truck is registered. So I'm not comfortable with this if we're not going to get any financial benefit for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crockett. Town council has informed me that mobile food truck vendors are subject to the meals tax, but we would have to look into, I think, in more detail your question about where that tax revenue goes to, unless anyone has information. Seeing no one from the board or committee, that would be something that the town would have to look into further, I believe. In the front, yes, go ahead, please.
Mary Beth Chang, 23 Burnham Road. As I listen to everyone who's spoken, I confess I feel a bit ambivalent about this motion in that it would be wonderful to have a new revenue stream in our community where we're so tight every year on both our town and our school budget. So some thinking outside the box and a new service would be wonderful. However, having the recommendation, nearly recommendation from the planning board is very concerning for me. I recently heard on, I was listening to the morning radio news, and there was a small business owner who was complaining, a food service business owner complaining about wanting government to support their efforts to start a new business. I think it was like a tea house in Jamaica Plain or something. And the small business owner was having difficulty jumping through hoops trying to get it open. So I definitely would like to see an opportunity for our community to have a new service, a possible new revenue stream, without a prolonged, lengthy process to get there. But I do think we need to take advantage of our board members who have looked at the proposal and have concerns. So that's my thought.
Thank you. Would any other voter like to speak on this motion? Yes, in the back. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Tom Lancaster, 166 Large Row.
Go ahead, Mr. Lancaster.
I think a lot of the speakers have some good points on both sides. I just want a clarification. The way the article is written, it says may authorize, not shall authorize. So as I understand it, all we're talking about here is whether to authorize the board to allow this pilot program to happen. It would still be subject to the board having granted those permits. Is that correct? Because my opinion would be if it's just may, then all we're doing here is we're not saying this shall happen, and all we're saying is it could happen. It's a tool that the board could study more, the planning board could study more, the petitioners could address the board. Could we get a clarification on that? Because as I understand, we're saying we're allowing this tool to be added to the tool set that's allowed by what the board would have to grant. It would still be subject to the select board's approval.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. Ms. Weeks, go ahead.
I just wanted to respond to the point about the planning board getting another shot at this. If this overlay district is passed, the planning board does not get another shot at it. We've had our opportunity, and the people we heard from at our public hearing were not in favor. So there is no public hearing process before the Board of Selects, and so I'm not sure where the public input comes in before a license for one of these trucks. And this is not a pilot program, it's a limited program, but it's permanent. So I just wanted to just clarify that part of our reasoning. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you, Ms. Weeks. Yes, sir, I believe town council may have a brief answer to your question or an attempt to.
Just one comment. We've read this, and it is less than clear
to me on a challenge how discretionary the select board authority would be deemed. The district defines the use as of right and then requires a permit, and as written, the level of discretion is unclear.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. Would anyone else like to speak on the motion that's on the floor? Go ahead in the front.
Hi, Michelle Bailey, 2 Remington Road.
Go ahead, Ms. Bailey.
My question is, so my understanding is that the question here is whether or not someone is allowed to have a food truck parked at a specific location for more than one short period of time. But I'm a little bit confused as to, if we vote no, what would allow this to happen? Because it doesn't seem like anybody's saying, hey, we will do this. What we're hearing is that we could consider it in the master plan. Master plan funding was authorized at our town meeting almost a year ago, and we're just now getting around to getting the consultant. So I feel like the time is now to try something new, and there's a lot of details to work out, but I feel like reasonable people can work things out, and I'm hoping that everyone would be reasonable about what to expect from this.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Any other comments, questions on the motion on the floor? Go ahead in the front.
Francis Carr, 5 Meridian Road.
Go ahead, Mr. Carr.
Is it appropriate to amend the motion such that after a year it is canceled and will require reauthorization?
Give me 1 second to confer with town council on that, please. Order, please. Order. Thank you. I've conferred with legal counsel, and they can chime in to correct anything that I'm about to say, but the on the floor opinion of legal counsel is that yes, an amendment could be made to add a time limitation or an automatic expiration of the zoning bylaw and the overlay district.
I move to amend the article such that it automatically expires 1 year and 30 days after approval at this meeting.
The motion has been made and seconded. Please come to the microphone to raise your point of order. And Mr. Carr, please come up and fill out.
I may not be opposed to your amendment, but under the rules, I believe, you cannot amend after you have spoken to it.
That's not correct, sir.
You spoke to the article, you can't make a motion afterwards.
That's correct. That's not correct, sir. Mr. Carr, please come forward and write out your motion. I just ask how many you stand by as we get the written motion. All right, if we could come back to order. The motion to amend has been made and seconded. It reads as follows. I move to amend the motion such that it will automatically expire 1 year plus 30 days after it is passed. Would anyone like to speak on the motion to amend?
Benjamin Timon, 236 Larch Row, and counsel to the petitioner. Just to say that the petitioners would not oppose the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Timon. Go ahead in front.
Diane Vugo, 783 Topsfield Road. What does this mean, this amendment? That it expires, is it just off the bylaws after a year and 30 days? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bucco. Sorry. Go ahead.
Ken Whitaker, 70 on Road.
Go ahead, Mr. Whitaker.
I'm not necessarily opposed or for this motion, but my problem is process here. So many questions, no answers, then we're talking about, well, repealing it maybe a year later. We need to take a look at the process, what we're doing here, and there seems to be more questions, more concerns. The motion has been amended, it's been changed before it was motioned in the first place. Now there's a question about how much of the reduction was in the area along 97. I'm frankly very confused, and I think if we do want to do that, independent of any decision by the planning board, let's take a moment and really try to understand what we got here. We don't even know where the tax revenue is going. So, whether you're for this or not, as just suggest that we take the time and study this and understand exactly what we're voting on here before we go forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you. In the rear.
Jonathan Prescott, 9 Hall Street again.
And Mr. Prescott, I know that you've spoken on the article, you did not use all your time, and there's been a motion to amend, so you can speak on the motion to amend, and I'll give you the 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Yes. In follow-up to reasonableness and due diligence, I just have to say that as an abutter, not having been notified for the overlay district, I believe that that's something that our select board and our planning board has spoken to, and it's something that we should all be concerned about, that it's reasonable for us to go before our planning board and notify our abutters if we have a plan that is affecting others in our community. And I just feel that because that process was not followed here, I would encourage again a no vote.
Thank you, Mr. Prescott. Town council informs me with respect to the meals tax issue, it's point of sale, so it should go to Wenham for any food truck that is operating in Wenham at the time. Are there any other comments or questions on the motion?
Move to a vote, please.
Well, I don't think we need to move to the vote since there's no speakers at the lineup, so we will proceed to a vote on the motion to amend. We are voting on the motion to amend that Mr. Carr has made at this time. That motion, even though the main motion will ultimately require a 2/3 majority, the motion to amend only requires a simple majority. All right, all those in favor of the motion to amend? Thank you. All those opposed to the motion to amend? All right, let's try that one more time before I have to bring out the tellers. All those in favor of the motion to amend? Thank you. All those opposed to the motion to amend? It passes by majority. So, we will now return to the main motion as amended and vote on that. Again, this includes the amendment offered by Mr. Carr. The motion as amended does still require a 2/3 vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. Just waiting with the assistant moderator. The motion fails to carry the 2/3 vote.
Looks like it's still Chipotle's.
Order, please. We're moving on to Article 14, the last article of the day, other than the election of officers. In order to provide some background information on this article, I will invite Diane Bucco of the Select Board to make a presentation on the origin of the article. It is my understanding that the Select Board, as a proponent of the article, will ask Patrick Waddell, Chair of the Town Government Study Committee's 3 to 5 subcommittee, to briefly explain the subcommittee's work. After these two presentations, I will recognize Deirdre Parati from the subcommittee to offer the majority recommendation to increase the Select Board to 5 members. Following that, I will recognize Harriet Davis of the subcommittee to offer the minority recommendation to remain with a 3-member board. As with all other comments, I ask Ms. Parati and Ms. Davis to stick to the 3 minutes. After these summaries, Ms. Bucco will then explain the Select Board's work after the subcommittee submitted its report. I recognize this will be a number of speakers on a single warrant article and that we're nearing the end of today's meeting. But it is the moderator's impression that this article, which deals with the town governance structure itself, is of significant importance and it is critical that you, as the voters, have as much information as you need to make your decision today. Before I turn things over to Ms. Bucco, I will pause to note that I was an appointed member of the subcommittee. Given that I would preside as moderator over any town meeting at which the issue is put on the warrant, however, I abstained from making a recommendation so as to remain impartial. With that noted, I will ask Ms. Bucco to get us started.
Welcome to Article 14. Increase the Select Board from 3 to 5 members. I, Diane Kaplan-Bucco, Select Board member and resident at 73 Topsfield Road, am here to introduce the article by giving the meeting a brief history of how it came to be Article 14 at this annual town meeting on April 2nd, 2022. 2 years ago, in 2020, a citizen's petition was brought to the Board of Selectmen with the required 10 certified signatures and was therefore placed on the warrant as written for the special town meeting on October 17, 2020. It was listed as Article 8. However, because the article was not written in legally proper form, the meeting could only take a non-binding vote on this article. That vote passed. In response to the town meeting support of the 3 to 5 concept, the Board of Selectmen in January 2021 formed the Town Government Study Committee. 7 residents plus 2 ex officio members, our interim town administrator and our former town council, town moderator, were appointed. The charge given to the committee was to study the possible reorganization of our town government by researching an increase in number of our Select Board membership. The question offered to the committee was simply, will the town be better served by a 3-person or a 5-person Select Board? The research shows it's not that simple. I will now yield the floor to the committee to describe their proceedings, but first I'd like to thank those members on behalf of the Select Board, past and present, for their time, energy, and focus in their very diligent work. We and the town appreciate your efforts.
Mr. Waddell.
Thank you very much, Diane. I want to echo Diane's thanks to the committee. This was a fantastic committee. I want to name the committee members individually. Kirsten Alexander, David Anderson, Harriet Davis, Michael Lucy, Deirdre Parati, Roger Smurridge, our moderator, and our ex officio members, Paul Weaver, Ryan Ferrara, and Tom Younger. We were busy. We had our first meeting in February, and we met 31 times over a 13-month period. We also hosted a table at the Shop Local Hamilton Wenham event last summer. We had many discussions, and they were at times heated as we debated the best size for Wenham Select Board, but we maintained a collaborative and collegial environment. We disagreed often, but respectfully. It is possible. The committee tried to hear as many voices as possible. We reached out to former Wenham Select Board members and town administrators. We sent questionnaires to other nearby towns' select boards who have considered this change. Some enlarged their boards and some did not. We created an online survey for Wenham board and committee members and town hall employees. We opened a very similar survey to Wenham citizens. We received over 100 responses, mostly from the members of Wenham board and committee members and employees. These are the people that would probably populate the seats if we were to expand the select board. The results of the questionnaire to key informants, the former select board members and town administrators, were fairly evenly split between 3 and 5. The sample size was pretty small. The survey for board and committee members and employees showed almost a 2-to-1 preference for a 5-member select board. We sent out the survey to 150 people. Of that, we received 64 responses. 38 of those responses said we should move to 5. 20 of those responses said stay at 3, and 6 had no preference or said it wouldn't make a difference. For our general population, our resident survey showed almost a 5-to-1 preference for a 5-member select board. But again, that sample size was small. We only got 34 responses. 20 people said 5, 4 people said 3, and 8 had no difference. After weighing the responses received, considering the experience of other towns, and debating the issue at our frequent meetings, we voted. We voted 4 in favor of going to 5, 2 in favor of staying at 3, with 1 abstention. Mr. Switzerland.
Careful, Patrick. We still have to work together a little bit more.
Voting in favor of the change by name was Kirsten Alexander, David Anderson, Deirdre Parati, and myself. Voting to remain at 3 was Harriet Davis and Michael Lucy. Roger Smerge, our town moderator, as noted, abstained. We presented our report to the select board, and they agreed that the question, whether Wenham will be best served by 3 or 5-member select board, should be presented to you at town meeting today. Again, I want to thank the committee. I truly enjoyed our time together, and now you will hear from the majority and the minority. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Waddell. Ms. Parati.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank Patrick Waddell for doing a superlative job in leading this committee. It was truly a pleasure to serve this past year. On behalf of the majority, we believe an expanded select board will provide the best governance structure to support the future of Wenham. We believe the reasons for expanding the board are compelling and future-oriented. A primary reason is positioning Wenham to solve the problems of the future. Wenham faces many entrenched issues, including an unsustainable tax burden, aging school infrastructure, and limited development options. We also face the increasingly complex problems of the 21st century, including things like climate change and pandemic illness. To rise to these challenges and cultivate local resilience, we need more minds and voices at the table focused on creative problem solving. We heard from many people that expanding the board presents the opportunity for more diverse representation and more perspectives. With 5 members, there is more ability to engage people with different training, career, and life experience, bringing more varied thinking to bear on the management of the town. By extension, it is likely to result in more thorough discussion of issues and therefore more well-reasoned, creative, and solid decision-making. One of the greatest strengths of the town of Wenham is a highly skilled, educated, and knowledgeable constituency. We believe there is still extensive untapped talent that would benefit the town if we are able to engage more people in a more open and transparent local government. A board of 5 members represents improved management infrastructure. It builds in not only flexibility, but long-term stability. More people will be well-versed in the issues of the town and will be able to keep things running as needed through election turnover, retirements, illness, etc. 5 members would be better able to stay connected to the residents as well as other parts of town government. The ideal management structure is one where consistent communication is the norm, creating synergies and facilitating informed planning by all town entities for the betterment of the town and its residents. Lastly, 5 members provides better risk mitigation. A larger board is inherently more able to mitigate the risk of one member acquiring too much influence and dominating the board. A 3-member board can be prone to 2 members aligning closely, leaving the third with little room for dissent or the space to successfully present an opposing viewpoint. 3-member boards can also become too ingrained in process and thinking, creating risk for things to go unattended to or falling through the cracks. Our informed opinion, based on a year of exploration, research, and deliberation, is that a board of 5 is a far more resilient board, better able to withstand difficulties and pressures, both internal and external. An expanded board is one that will ultimately benefit the residents of Wenham. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parati. Ms. Davis.
Good afternoon. I'm Harriet Davis, 162 Cherry Street, and I'm here on behalf of Paul Weaver, our former longtime moderator and town council, and Mike Lucy, former Finance Committee Chair, to present the minority position against increasing the number on the select board. For those of you who don't know me, I've served on most major town boards over the last 25 years, including select board, finance, community preservation, among others, and am currently chair of the Historic District Commission. This past year, we studied the issue and interviewed a number of present and former selectmen in Wenham and on the North Shore, and we note the following. 1, our population is only 3,500 once Gordon College is removed. 2, 94% of Massachusetts towns our size have a 3-person board. 3, small towns that did increase the board size to 5 also increased the powers of the town administrator to allow the board to focus on long-term strategy and finance issues. 4, adding 2 more to the Wenham Select Board now would add confusion and complexity, as Wenham is currently governed by a town administrator without the powers of day-to-day operating authority, which would require an additional warrant article delegating that authority. Therefore, we feel a move to 5 is premature, as Wenham has not done any work on the necessary legal and governance changes. 6, the office of selectman is not an entry-level position. Finding candidates to serve the town is daunting, as many elections have been uncontested, and vacancies abound to this day on many boards and committees. 8, for many years, Wenham has been well served by a board of 3, made up of longtime residents who've had experience on other town boards and have hit the road running as selectmen. 9, the process to increase the board to 5 members will take several years to accomplish through legislative and ballot box procedures. 10, this time would be better directed towards the problems and issues of the day. The Main Street renovations by the Department of Transportation, the escalating tax rate, and the master plan that's currently being developed. 11, finally, it is inappropriate to attempt to change our government structure as we hire a new town administrator. I urge you all to vote no on this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Ms. Bucco, if you would wrap up our presentation.
So here we are, just about to get to the discussion and vote on Article 14 to increase the select board from 3 to 5 members. But before we do that, I'm here now to explain what process would happen after that vote. Your select board is discussed at length during several meetings. We discussed the options offered by Mass General Law and voted 2 to 1 for the following timeline. You should have a handout with a really cool flow chart that also explains this process in a more visible way. But first, it may be obvious, but if the vote here at this town meeting fails to win a majority, there'll be no further action. However, if the vote passes today, the town clerk will send the article to the Massachusetts General Court via our Senator and Representative Bruce Tarr and Jamie Belcito for approval. Most Most likely, the general court will not act on this until the fall of 2022, but once they do, and if they approve it, the town of Wenham will be able to hold a ballot vote to accept the special act. This vote must be no sooner than 35 days after that approval, and can be at our next town election, be it a special or annual. Then, if the result of that election is positive for the special act, at the next election, special or annual, there will be 3 select board seats offered on the ballot. 2 seats will be for the standard 3-year terms, and the third will be for a 2-year term. This configuration will allow for a rotating membership on the select board. However, all select board seats going forward will still be 3 years. With all that said, I can now pass the discussion back to the moderator. Thank you all for attending the town meeting, and I thank my fellow select board members for allowing me the privilege to present this article.
Thank you to each of you for your remarks. Mr. Waddell, if you would please return to your seat. There's no motion on the floor. Gotcha, Patrick. You'll have your moment. Don't worry. So thank you again to all of you, including Patrick, for your remarks. You have given your fellow citizens helpful information as they make their decision today on how to vote. And I would just like to say, notwithstanding the fact that the subcommittee's recommendation was not unanimous, and notwithstanding the fact that I abstained from a recommendation, this was a very collaborative group. It was a pleasure working with the 6 other members of the subcommittee and the ex officio members over the prior year as we dug into the issue. Now, if Diane Bucco of the Select Board wishes to make the formal motion under Article 14, I will entertain the motion.
I move that the town authorize the select board to petition the general court for a special act as printed in the warrant and approve Article 14 as printed in the warrant.
Is there a second? The motion has been made and seconded. The motion covers both the question of increasing the size of the board and the process for implementing such a change if passed. So to oversimplify a bit, the motion presents 2 items for consideration: whether to increase the number of select board members, and if so, how. Before I open the floor to discussion, it is the moderator's impression that orderly consideration of the motion will be served by way of separate consideration of these 2 aspects of the motion. Under Section 50 of town meeting time, the moderator may call for special consideration of 2 interrelated aspects of a motion under a single warrant article, if the moderator believes doing so will promote orderliness. I do believe this to be the case here for 2 reasons. First is potential time savings. If town meeting decides to vote against an increase in the select board size, the main motion would necessarily fail, and debate on the separate aspect of the motion relating to the form of the special legislation would not be necessary. Second is avoiding confusion. This article, as I said, puts 2 questions to town meeting, and it is my belief separate consideration will make sure that everyone knows and understands which of those questions is being discussed and voted on at any given point during the process. For these reasons, I hereby move as the moderator for separate consideration of the 2 aspects of the motion pending under Article 14. The process for separate consideration is as follows. We will conduct a series of 3 discussions and votes. First, I will allow discussion on the first aspect of the motion, whether to increase the select board size to 5 members. Amendments can be made to that aspect of the motion, but only that aspect during this part of the discussion. Then we will conduct a vote on the first aspect of the motion. If that vote is in the negative, the entire motion under Article 14 fails and we move on. If the vote on the first aspect is in the affirmative, we then move to discuss and vote on the second aspect of the motion, what form the special legislation increasing the select board size should take. Here again, amendments can be made to that aspect, but only that aspect during the second part of the discussion. Finally, if there's an affirmative vote on the form of special legislation, we'll move to the 3rd phase of discussion and voting, which will be on the entire motion as amended if applicable, through the separate consideration process. During this discussion on the full motion, the entire motion is still subject to potential amendment, just like any discussion of any main motion under a warrant article. Following that discussion, we will conduct one final up or down vote on the full motion as amended if applicable. So, to recap, 3 steps. Whether to increase the size of the select board, if so, through what legislation, and then final discussion and vote. With that process laid out, would anyone like to speak on the first aspect of the motion, whether to authorize the select board to submit some form of special legislation to increase the size of the select board to 5 members? In the rear.
Jared Ward, 24 Mayflower.
Go ahead, Mr. Ward.
What are the quorum requirements for a 5-member board? And what happens if somebody's out of town and you get a 2-2 deadlock? How is this gonna work?
So I believe I can answer that one. The quorum requirement for a 5-member board, as with any other 5-member board in town, is 3. And a deadlock 2-2 results in the same as a deadlock 1-1 in a 3-member board or committee. Any other questions on the first aspect, whether to increase the select board size? Any other comments, questions, or speakers? Seeing no one else approach the microphones and seeing no one from the multipurpose room coming in, we will move to a vote. This vote is a simple majority, and again, if this vote passes, we will move on to consideration of the second aspect. All those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. All those opposed? The motion passes by majority. Okay. So, the vote on the first aspect is in the affirmative, and we will now move on to the second aspect of the motion under Article 14. What form the special legislation increasing the select board to 5 members should take? Hold on one second, Patrick. I know you're eager. I know you're eager. You're gonna miss me at those meetings. What form the special legislation increasing the select board to 5 members should take? The form of special legislation proposed by the motion, as printed in the article, also appears in the screens. Michelle can bring it up. Thank you. Would anyone, I'm not sure if there will be, would anyone like to speak on this aspect of the motion? Mr. Waddell, what a surprise.
Patrick Waddell, 5 Great Pond Road. So this, as written, it would not be enacted, if we are to move forward, would not be enacted until 2024. And that is due to this going to the ballot first, go to the legislature, come back to the ballot, and then wait another year to actually vote for the additional 2 members. I move that we strike Section 3 and replace it with text from KP Law, and this will shorten the time frame. It reads, if the ballot question authorized by this section shall appear on the same ballot as do candidates for the additional select board member positions to be filled under Section 2, and a majority of the votes cast on the question of whether to accept the act are in the affirmative, then the persons with the highest number of votes for each office shall be declared to be elected. If a majority of votes on the question is in the negative, the ballot for candidates shall not be counted. This basically, that's the motion. This shortens the time frame so that we vote whether or not to increase the board from 3 to 5, and at the same time elect our new select board members. So this would be done in 2023 completely, as opposed to 2023 and then 2024.
The motion's been made and seconded. Give me a minute. I think everyone would appreciate it if we have the motion text up on the screen, so please give me a minute to work with Ms. McGovern to get the motion to amend up on the screen. as I said, the motion has been made and seconded. Would anyone like to speak on the motion to amend? Which again is a motion to strike section 3 as printed in the warrant and replace it with the new proposed section 3 that Mr. Waddell has offered. In the front.
Diane Bucco, 73 Topsfield Road.
Go ahead, Ms. Bucco.
Based on that amendment, I just want to explain the reasoning that we used the 2-to-1 in the select board. And what I believe is important is it takes time to make sure that this is something we want to do for our town. If we're going to change our government after so many years, from a 3-board to a 5-board, I think it really needs a lot of time for everybody to understand and for people to know that that's what they want to do. And then if it's approved, then they can campaign and win those seats. If people decide they want to campaign and try to win those seats, and run a campaign and try to win those seats, and on the same ballot, there's a vote on whether we're going to even accept them or not, they've wasted a lot of time. So that's why I think time and money, maybe signs do cost more every year. So I just thought it would make it easier on everybody, and it would give the town more time to think the whole concept through. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Thank you, Ms. Bucco.
Gary Cheeseman, 75 Pleasant Street.
Go ahead.
So yes, the vote was 2-to-1. My main concern is if you have the ballot vote and then the election vote at the same time, essentially you set up what I consider an unfair election. The one seat that's on the normal 3-year rotation will be a guaranteed slot. The other 2, you're asking candidates to run the campaign, invest their time and resources for a position that might not even be there at the end of the day. What that may occur or make is a very unbalanced election where some people will decide, well, I'm going for the sure seat, and others will go, well, everybody's going that way, I'm going to go this way, and go for one of the maybe seats. In this day and age, my whole objective here has been to have a fair election. So if we take the time, and it's not actually 2024, it's the next election after the 2023. So we could have a special election in there. But I do not want to see an election where candidates are running for maybe seats and candidates are running for sure seats. That puts up a situation where people be gaming the system, gaming the election, and I don't think that's what one wants.
Go ahead in the rear.
Rick Woods on 26 Maple Street.
Go ahead, Mr. Woodland.
I'm not an expert at all at government law. I admit that. That's why we have a council. But we did approve a recall petition, I think last year about this time, where essentially there were 2 votes in that on that election. It would be vote A to whether you're going to recall this person, and then on the same day you would vote for the replacement. So I think there's a similarity there that we've already kind of set, that it's not a sure thing that the position will be available for you, but to go for it anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woodland.
Catherine Harrison, 49 Pleasant Street.
Go ahead, Ms. Harrison.
So I wasn't really planning to stand up on this particular issue, but since I was the one in the vote of 2-to-1, the select board and my other select board members have declined, I thought I would as well. My main reason, and what we've heard many times, is that if we are going to approve this process, if we want 5 select board members, then we need to get to it. And I don't consider at least a year a very long time. I also think that, or too short a time, I also agree with Mr. Woodland, and I was going to say that myself. We already, as a town, passed regulation or a bylaw that allows us to make the decision in a recall, whether to recall the person, and at the same election, to elect a new person to replace that. So we already have approved this process that's been contemplated in this amendment. So if we thought it was going to work then, I think it will work now. A lot of thought has gone into it. This was originally brought to the town 2019. And we've heard that folks apparently would like to see it move to 5. So just as a point of explanation why I am not in favor of extending the time period for us to be enacted any longer than is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nickerson.
Michelle Bailey, 2 Remington Road.
Go ahead, Ms. Bailey.
So my question to the select board is, if it is possible for us not to wait for a whole nother election cycle, why did we not put into the request for special legislation that there would be an election within so many days after the first election? Because to me, that seems like, I do understand gaming the election being potentially an issue, but that doesn't seem any reason why you couldn't hold an election 90 days later to add those additional members. So I would like the Board of Selectmen to maybe explain why they chose to wait a whole year.
So, thank you, Ms. Bailey. One thing, the legislation as proposed in the main motion and in the warrant article doesn't actually prohibit that, town council informs me. It just says at the next election, those 2 new positions will be voted. With that clarification, if the select board wishes to provide any further information about their thinking, seeing no volunteers from this.
Gary Cheeseman, 75 Pleasant Street. So yes, as the motion is, it is at the next election, which could be a special or regular town meeting. So expected timeline, legislature, as we saw in the recall, takes quite a few months. The recall got back in December, so sometime this fall we would receive, if the legislature approved it, the act. The next scheduled town election would be a year from today, which would be the acceptance vote on the act from the legislature. Then afterwards, whenever the next election is, whether special, we can arrange, or regular, would have the votes. That gives the people time to campaign, and I think that was the one consideration that the select board, 2-to-1, thought that we ought to have a separation between the acceptance vote and the ballot vote. And that does not necessarily mean the whole another year to 24. It could be a special election if we want to go that way.
Thank you, Mr. Cheeseman. Hold on 1 second, Mr. Waddell.
Tracy?
Yes. So one thing that town council points out to me is that when there is a election with candidates on it, you need at least 64 days from the time the board votes to the election to allow for the process for candidates to pull papers, get signatures, submit them to the town clerk, and get them certified, and give the town clerk time to prepare the ballot. Little town clerk humor up here. Thank you, Trudy. Go ahead in the front.
Patrick Waddell, 5 Great Point Road.
Go ahead.
I just want to remind people that Wenham typically does not like specials. We don't like special town meetings, we don't like special elections, and there is a cost associated with that, which would go straight to your pocket.
Thank you, Mr. Waddell.
Susan Malin, 18 Burnham Road. I have a
Go ahead, Ms. Malin.
I have a question regarding the clarification of election. When you say town election, is that strictly a town election, or is it a state election, or potentially a presidential election?
It is just the town election. It cannot be a state or a presidential.
So in other words, if there's a state election and there's nothing on the ballot for the town, no candidates, then that doesn't count. Is that correct?
Town council has something to chime in here.
Hello, everyone. Lauren Goldberg. I used to work for the elections division as legal counsel, and I just can't sit there and not say it. So you could have a special election on the same date as a state election or a presidential preference primary. However, knowing how much work that is, it's not necessarily required. And that the act is written broadly to allow for the board to do what they need to do in terms of calling it and not to prohibit them. So it will not appear on the state ballot. It will not appear on a presidential ballot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Julia Campbell, 7 Birch Road.
Go ahead, Ms. Campbell.
I would say I support this article, and I have 2 problems with things that were said in opposition to it. One, saying that the select board is not an entry-level position. That's not democracy. Absolutely anybody can run. Anyone in this room can throw their hat in the ring at any time, and I believe that that is the reason why more people do not participate in local government, because they think there have to be special qualifications, they have to have lived in the town a certain number of years, they have to have served on a certain number of committees. So I would just like to say, in my experience, and just in view of the Constitution, that's not true. And the second thing I would say is that having more voices is never a bad thing. Increasing the number of voices on a committee can only add to discourse, can only add to a variety of perspectives.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
I hesitate to interrupt, but
Sure.
we're at the moment
Sure.
discussing the second aspect.
The second aspect.
Which is the
So
form of
I
legislation.
also believe that getting this done sooner rather than later is absolutely necessary for our town to move forward. I think a lot of the discussion that I've heard today is every single dot I has to be dotted, T has to be crossed, all the ducks have to be in a row, the stars have to align. Everything has to be completely perfect for anything to move forward. And as we know, especially we saw with the pandemic, anything can happen, so that is not the case. So I would encourage you to vote yes on the amendment and vote yes on the article. Thank you.
In the rear.
Peter Clay, 14 Arbor.
Go ahead, Mr. Clay.
I just want to say that I support Diane and Gary's point of view that we should separate those 2 votes. 9 months, a year, that's all we're talking about here. And I think making sure that we get a good, clean election both times is the way to go.
Thank you, Mr. Clay. In the front.
Ken Whitaker, 17 on the road. First of all, I'll ask what the big rush is, but notwithstanding that, I think this is a really big deal. And this is a very big deal for the town, and I commend everybody who voted for this. This is something, since I was on the Board of Selectmen, that I was really wishing for a number of years, and I really commend you guys for putting it together. Nothing wrong with a special election here. This is a special day for the town. And whatever it takes, but I don't think we need to rush it, but if we could do it by a special election, 60 days, 90 days, or so forth, let's go ahead and do it. But let's make it a very important day for the town, because it is.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. Okay. Seeing no one else at the microphones, we will now move to vote on the motion to amend. And just to summarize, an affirmative vote on this motion would accept Mr. Waddell's replacement of Section 3 to condense things to a single election. A vote in the negative would keep things as proposed in the warrant article, 2 elections. 1, a ballot question to accept the legislation after it comes back from the legislature, and then, assuming that passes, a separate election at some future date for the actual election of 2 new select board members. So, with that set out, all those in favor of the motion to amend? Thank you. All those opposed to the motion to amend? The motion fails by majority. So, we're now back to the second aspect of the motion as originally made and as reflected in the warrant book and up on the screen. So, any further comments, questions on the form of special legislation. I'm sorry, I just didn't hear your name.
Sue Petrolia, 6 Eden Road.
Go ahead, Ms. Petroli.
I guess I'm still confused at this point. So can we amend something to require a special election 90 days after the? No, I don't know. I have no idea. But
The floor is free to offer any amendments that it wishes, and I will, the floor being you. Yeah.
Big day for me. It's so exciting.
Or any other member of town meeting. So at this time, we're still under that second step in the separate consideration process. So any amendments to the special legislation can still be offered at this time. And I will determine whether any proffered motions to amend are within the scope.
So am I supposed to proffer a motion?
What I'm trying to tell you is I can't tell you whether or not to offer a motion.
I'm gonna suggest that we amend this to require a special election of the potential new select board members 90 days after the, I'm running out of words here. Once we vote to go ahead and move to 5.
There's been a motion to amend offered. I believe it's within the scope. Is there a second? Miss, you do need to come up and write out your motion. And I think this is a good time for anyone that needs to use the restroom to do so. We'll just take a couple of minutes as we get the motion sorted out, and then I'll call us back to order. Don't leave the meeting hall, though. Plenty happening here on the floor. Okay. Calling the meeting back to order. We have a motion to amend that has been made and seconded. The motion reads as follows. Move to amend Section 3 of the special legislation to strike the words "at least 60" and insert in place thereof the words "no later than 90." Would anyone like to speak on the motion to amend?
Hi, Trudy Reed, 53 Topsfield Road.
Go ahead, Ms. Reed.
Obviously, everybody knows I'm the town clerk. Elections fall under my department. Elections are not cheap. We have not budgeted for a special election. We barely can get staff for our regular elections. So I'm concerned that if we call a special election in the same year as 2 state elections that we will be having in September and November, it's going to put a strain on the staff and on the budget. We would be responsible for the printing of the ballots, the coding of the machines, paying the staff, and I love elections. You ask any town clerk in the North Shore, and I love elections, but when these specials are thrown in at us and it's not prepared for, it makes it for a tighter year. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Ms. Reed.
Could I amend the budget to increase my salary?
Good try, Trudy. Good try. Would anyone else like to speak on the motion to amend? I note that council may have something to add here. Ms. Bailey, if you can just hold on for a second while Ms. Goldberg steps in.
Once upon a time, Trudy and I were friends. Here we go. I just want to point out, I think it's highly unlikely that the legislation would be passed in time for any question to be able to be put on a ballot, and even in this fiscal year. The legislature, as everyone knows, is very, very busy dealing with the post-COVID stuff, and they're all running for office. So not a lot of business will get done between now and Christmas.
From the floor, Ms. Bailey.
Thanks. So I'm
Just for the record, name.
Michelle Bailey, 2 Remington Road.
Thank you.
So I want to be sure that I know what I'm voting on here. We're voting on whether or not to have that no matter what, there will be a vote 1 year from now on whether or not to approve the special legislation that's been approved. And then in 90 days, there will be an election of the new members if the ballot is successful.
Yes, and actually, Michelle,
Okay.
could you bring back up the special legislation text on the motion slide? I think that might help everyone. But yes, so it would replace.
So that would definitely be in next fiscal year, not the fiscal year we're voting on, because that would end on June 1st, and 90 days would be more like in July sometime.
The fiscal year 23 will end June 30 of 2023.
Right, and
so
so
fiscal
this
24
90-day
starts.
election will be sometime in July. So it won't be in the fiscal year that we
Well,
just
it's no
approved.
later than 90 days.
Okay. But we know it's more than 62.
Yes. Okay. Would anyone else like to speak on the motion to amend? In the front.
Hi, Scott Crockett, 5 Bridge Road.
Go ahead, Mr. Crockett.
I'm just wondering, do we know how much a special election would cost, just to give us some perspective?
Somewhere between $2,000 to $5,000.
Thank you.
In the rear.
Charles Hungans, 70 Arthur Street.
Go ahead.
You just said a minute ago that we were going to strike the 60-day requirement and just have it be less than 90. But I thought the 60-day requirement was something that was sort of best practices to allow people enough time. So I'm a little confused as to what the amendment is.
So the amendment is the words in the article are replaced to say no later than 90 days, but the state election law would still require it to be 64 days later. So the actual practical effect is that the second election would be between 64 and 90 days after the ballot question vote.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I see no one else at the microphones. So we're going to move to a vote on the motion to amend. Again, this is a motion to amend section 3, as we've been discussing, to strike the words at least 60 and replace them with no later than 90. Simple majority for the motion to amend. All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? The motion passes by majority. All right, so we are now still on the second aspect. We've got now an amended version of the special legislation. Any other discussion, any other comments on the process aspect of this before we take a vote on whether to move forward with the amended version of the special legislation? Okay. Yes, can you state your point of order from the floor, please?
Gary Chief, 79 Pleasant Street. Are we not in the third question here?
No, we're still on the second question. The main motion, the separate consideration on the second aspect, the form, still needs a affirmative vote on the second aspect. We voted on the motion to amend that part, but we still need to take a motion to accept the second aspect and move to the final phase. So, we will now do that, but thank you for your point of order, Mr. Cheeseman. All right, so a vote here will a vote in favor will be for the special legislation in the form that it now exists, which is as amended by the most recent motion to amend. A vote against will put that legislation, that form of legislation down. We're doing simple majority again. All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? Passes by majority. So we will now proceed to the third and final. We'll proceed to the third and final aspect of separate consideration. So the final motion, in summary, is to authorize the select board to submit special legislation in the form that was just approved, which includes the amendment to replace at least 60 in section 3 with no later than 90. Would anyone like to speak on the motion now, as it now stands, after separate consideration? As a reminder, I know we've had a lot of good discussion. It still is technically subject to amendment. Town meeting time requires me to advise the town meeting of that. Seeing no one approach the microphones, we will now move to the full final vote. Again, this is an up or down vote on the entire motion. A vote in favor, will authorize the select board to submit the legislation increasing the select board size to the legislature in the approved form as amended, whereas a vote against will still keep the select board size at 3 members. The motion requires that should it pass and the legislature enact the legislation, the town would still have to accept the change to the select board size at a subsequent election. A vote on this motion requires a simple majority. All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? The motion passes by majority. All right. Bear with me. Article 15. Article 15 is our annual election of officers. When the town meeting form of government developed, this would be done here at town meeting itself. But in modern times, Thanks to Trudy's help, we do that through an annual town election. That will be held this Thursday, April 7th, 2022, at Town Hall. So we will technically not vote on this article today, other than a motion to adjourn until the conclusion of the election. Before entertaining that motion, I will read the list of officers who shall be elected on Thursday. 1 member of the Board of Assessors for a 3-year term. 1 member of the Board of Health for a 3-year term. 1 member of the Select Board for a 3-year term. A Wenham trustee for the Hamilton-Wenham Regional Library Trust for a 3-year term. 3 members of the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School Committee, all for 3-year terms. 1 member of the Planning Board for a 5-year term. 1 member of the Water Commission for a 3-year term. And 1 member of the Wenham Housing Authority for a 5-year term. We have now come to the end of our business for today. Please remain in your seats for a few more minutes, however. I want to thank everyone for your patience, for your participation, and for the lively yet civil debate we had here today. And I want to thank, again, everyone who assisted with the setup of this town meeting as we move back under the Bucher School roof. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting, I do want to discuss the process for leaving. I think we still have the ushers in the back. They'll dismiss you. Please go row by row so we don't have a rush to the exits. I want to remind everyone to look at the town's website for updates on COVID-19. Yes, we still have to deal with that. Hopefully not much longer, but we still do. Vacancies on town boards and committees, and other information related to town business. We always have a number of roles within the town that could use volunteers. And I encourage everyone here today to consider giving a little of your time back to the community. Now, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the annual town meeting for 2022. I know you're eager, but until the conclusion of the annual election on Thursday, April 7th, at which time the 2022 annual town meeting will be dissolved. Is there a second? Mr. Waddell.
I would just like to say thank you to our moderator. He's done a fantastic job.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. This is, as I said at the outset, an instrumental part of our democratic process. And so, as much as you thank you all for coming out and ensuring that we had quorum today. I really appreciate it. I know Saturday afternoons, especially as we get into the spring, are precious, but this is important work we do. With the motion seconded, we will now take our final vote of the afternoon. It requires a simple majority. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Didn't think so. The motion passes unanimously. The town meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all for coming. Be sure to vote on Thursday. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you. Good night.